Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And I do not remember where I started this when we just got into it and started talking. So you get the beginning, you get the whole thing unedited. What I wanted to talk about, maybe what we ended up talking about, but great conversation, long conversation. I think there's a lot to be taken from it in that, think about how lucky you are if you're born in the U.S., the opportunities you have. Think about the struggles of being an immigrant and everything he's been able to accomplish. And also look at how he's serving in his own unique way. Not necessarily part of big business or big organizations. Not saying they don't have their place, but all I'm saying is you, as an individual, you can do whatever you want. You can make it happen. May not be perfect, may be a little messy, may not be on a large, grandiose scale. But if you're into serving people and helping people, you can definitely do that. And in your own unique way. So, I hope you enjoy the conversation. And until next time. Profound, it doesn't get missed.
Okay.
I always do that, and then half the time I'll always check, am I sure that I hit record? How do you pronounce your first name?
Loo-beem. Loo-beem.
Loo-beem. All right.
Loo-beem.
All right. Well, we'll get started. What I'll do is I'll just make an introduction. And kind of what I want to talk about is a little bit of, hold on. I had it here for a second. What other? Definitely like how to lead when there's no system and learning leadership, but kind of I watched a lot of your interviews and, what's striking to me is you've come to the U.S., you've done these things, but then you decided to strike out on your own. And I would probably say similar to an immigration experience in that you're going out into a world that you know nothing about, or you know some things about, but it's something you want to do. And there's a series of obstacles, whether it's entrepreneurial or immigratorial, that you have to navigate and overcome to be successful. And you've managed to do that. And then we'll get into what you're doing and why you do it.
So we'll just talk and you guide me with your questions, and I'll just follow the lead.
Sounds good. Yeah, because I definitely like to see how a little bit of upbringing leads to where we are now. And then always love to explore people who take a chance and what you get from taking that chance in terms of reward that's often not monetarily. In today's world, it's so gross. It makes me ill in a way that everything is attached to money. Yes, we need money, no mission. I worked in healthcare for a lot of years. I am of the service industry. I understand no money, no mission. But as a society, I feel like we've gotten everything must be excess. Like when was, people forgotten that it's okay to be okay and enough is enough. And if we have excess, we should share the excess, because the more that we all have enough and the more that we're all okay, the more harmonious the world can be. It's the discrepancy in lack and excess that causes the rift and the friction.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I had this conversation daily with my friends. Every single day, it seems like the world got hijacked. And I don't know if it's the right place to start, but I remember the times, like my happiest times,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember the times were one of the worst times. Obviously, I'm going to pick specific examples.
Right.
So I immigrated to the United States back in 1992. It was one
What
year
was the
after this.
reason? Give us the reasoning for immigrating. What was going on where you were?
Okay, so we go even back earlier.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 1970s and the 80s in the
Mm-hmm.
former Soviet Union.
Okay.
When I was 5, the Afghanistan war started, and it lasted until I was 16.
Okay.
So my first part of my conscious life, that war was in the background, and the military service was mandatory in the former Soviet Union. So imagine you're 18, you get drafted, they take you out of your home and they send you to kill people somewhere, who knows where. At that time, it was Afghanistan. I was a little kid and I did sports. And Afghanistan vets, they were really cool to me.
Right.
They helped me with all my trainings and they would be really generous with their time. They would always hang out with the kids and they were super cool to us. Then at the end of the day, everybody got drunk and then the police would show up. And at those times, the police, their entertainment was to beat up Afghanistan vets. It was a normal thing. It occurred all the time. So to me, I was always wondering, like, first of all, why are those great guys? Why are they like this? And the second question was that why would the country that take like these great people send them, get them really mentally messed up, a lot of physically, and some would even die. But the system, not even that it didn't support them, they actually found an entertainment on picking fights with these guys. And it took me a really long time to answer that question. But I remember my dad saying that, we're not fighters, we don't kill people. It's not what our family, it's not the values I was raised. They were completely opposite from war. And I think now I am running a mission that takes care of people who took care of us, but I'm not the one who's going to do it. So when I was 17 years old, like Afghanistan war just ended, but what happened was that Ukraine was an independent country and it was a big chaos. Crime was everywhere. The economy was not doing well. There was practically no future. And that's when, well, my dad made a decision a long time ago, but we left 1 year after it fell apart. I don't know why he decided it was the time to go, but I think it was dangerous. He felt that, he started his own business. He was during the Soviet Union, it was prohibited to have your own business. Everybody had to work for the government. And, one time I remember we went to get some takeout food from our home and I didn't hear it. My younger sister heard it. She came home and she told parents, she said, look, this guy said, oh, here are the parents of a millionaire, which was not the truth. But just the fact that you had a business, you were placed into this different category and you immediately became a target. And I remember that year, my dad sent my stepmom and my two younger sisters. I think they went to Bulgaria for vacation and it lasted like the whole spring and summer. And in the fall, one day he came home and he said, Loo-beem, we're leaving. And I said, where are we going? And he said, his first question was when? He said, about 3 or 4 hours. And I said, where are we going? And he said, we're going to the United States. And I asked, for how long? And he said, forever.
Wow.
So I packed up. Yeah, I just graduated from high school. I was a national team athlete, so relatively popular. I really loved my life. I think I had the best life that you could have, and I packed up a bag. I got my ski boots, my suit, because I was a skier. I wanted to ski, and my helmet, and I wore my training suit. I remember not even having socks on the plane, and we left. We met my sisters and my stepmom. We met in Prague. We got on a Delta flight, and from Prague we flew into Newark Liberty Airport. That was my.
What do you remember, given that time? Like, I think, I mean, I was born in the US. I'm still here in the US. I was in the military. I've been overseas, so I've experienced travel, but I've never had to uproot because of a war, and or had my family make that conscious decision and effort to do something like your dad did. And that's just got to be crazy. And, in terms of context, what did you pull from, like, without going into, because this is not about whether you're religious, Christian, non, I believe the universe is the universe. There's something that we all have. Maybe we all call it something different, like water, but we all know we need it, and it's in every
Mhm.
culture. What did you pull from in terms of like an outlook of going, either I'm going to be okay, I'm going to make the best of it. Wow, this could possibly be the opportunity of a lifetime because, we don't get that because we're born here and we grow up here as US citizens. But, a lot of people don't realize in other countries where the economy may not be as robust and whatnot, a lot of people look at America and they think of going to America as like, man, opportunity awaits me. What was it like for you? Did you feel that opportunity awaited you? Where were you pulling your strength from, and what kind of ideas did you have going into this?
I think it would be important to mention that growing up during Cold War,
Hmm.
my image of the United States was that President Reagan is sitting in his office and he has this red button in front of him and he can go hit the button and it's the end.
Yeah,
And I talked to a lot of people who were growing up at the same time in the United States. They said, well, we had the same image.
yeah,
So I was going into a country that my my whole entire life I was told that it's a bad place, it's the enemy, it was this huge propaganda. But in reality, you know that it's the land of opportunities. So when I was going to the States, like I tell everybody, there were two dreams. One was mine and one was my father's. My dream
hmm.
was to ski.
Is
I
that it?
wanted to
Hey, isn't
ski.
that every son?
I don't know. I don't know.
uh,
I don't have one, so if I had a son, maybe I would know. But um, I was really lucky. I came in '92, and we came to New Jersey, and my uncle lived there for 5 years before we got there. And I asked him to help me to find a place where I can ski, and he wrote to all the different ski schools,
mhm.
and I got called to a National Sports Academy in Lake Placid just for an interview and a day of physical testing. And it was in 92 on Halloween. Actually, we drove there on Halloween, and they gave me a scholarship. They said, like, you can live here, you can eat, you can learn English, and you can ski as much as you want to. So I would say that my experience of the United States is very different than for most immigrant, in the sense that I got lucky that I was removed from my culture, or there are a lot of
Yeah,
clusters of people, immigrants that come, and they all tend to live together, especially in New York, New Jersey area. But I went to live in a boarding school with Americans. The only other non-American was a Japanese exchange student. So there
well,
were two of
and I
us.
think there's important to preface that one of the reasons your experience was even allowed to be different was because of some of the work and effort you put in beforehand. And, I think that should be important to any parents who have children who are listening, or if there's children listening to this show, that no matter where you are in what country and what you're doing, put some effort in, build a skill, become good at something, because you never know when that opportunity might arrive, that it kind of coincided for you. What made your opportunity possible was the fact that you had a set of skills because you'd put in hard work. And therefore,
it
with your uncle doing that, um, it kind of set
it
you on
was
a
not a new
path.
thing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
And I think it's really good that you brought it up, since you have, parents with kids in the audience. Think about this. I had one skill, which I was an athlete. One thing that you should know about me is that I got expelled from every grade in school except the eighth. And the eighth grade, I came in after the year started, and I left before it ended because I wanted to go to the school for the Olympic reserves, and it just was a way of transitioning. So I didn't spend the full year, but from first grade to last grade, I had issues with the school system in the former Soviet Union because they made me do stuff that I didn't want to do. When I wanted to ski, they made me sit in class.
Yeah.
But the Soviet Union broke up in 91. And as soon as it broke up, we got to notice that all our training camps and all the competitions are canceled. So 1 year I spent with tutors learning math. For 1 year, I shut the blinds. I didn't go anywhere. It was my graduating year. I didn't know if we're going to go to the States or if I'm going to stay in Ukraine. And I knew that I am done. You know, the sport, that chapter was, you know, that door was closed, and not by me. I was still able. I really wanted to. I was healthy. I was good enough, you know, to continue for a few years and see if I can make the national team and stay on. But it went away. So that year, my decision was to learn math, and I got really good at it. You know, when we came to the end of the year, I maxed out on my tests. And coming to the United States, when you don't speak English, right? It was my issue. I got letters that, look, your child is like, you take standard tests, and they start sending you warnings to your parents saying, look, you have he can't even like write his name.
Right.
But math was a different story. And since my dad's dream was for me to go to a good business school, and I agreed with him, you know, in terms of major, I really wanted to study business. You need to have strong mathematics skill. So coming from Ukraine and going to the US, I was good enough of an athlete, even though with taking 1 year break to get a scholarship. And then also when I went to, after I finished, I spent 1 year finishing high school because I needed to learn English. And then I went to a small community college before I transferred to New York University. And that year of doing math all the time and catching up on all the school that I skipped before, it was enough. So I completely agree with you. I had the skills. I never thought about it. But yes, if you have kids, that them having skills is important, and starting it early in life is
And
super important.
math is actually another language, you know, because engineers, they understand math. That is their language, you know, because either there's a finite answer for it and it's gonna work, or it's not. You know, to them it equals clarity. And you know, I'm not a great math student. I'm a high B, low A if I do it daily. But that is because math is similarly like learning a new language. If you do it daily, it's easier, because somebody told me organic chemistry the same way. They're like, you didn't memorize your mother's name. You learned it. You can't memorize organic chemistry and some math. You need to learn it. And you learn it by using it all the time and repetition.
Right.
And I was like, oh. And so that was the thing. I can remember being in college, and, you know, it was, if I did it daily, I was fine. But, you know, that's just not my forte. And, but I do admire people who, man, they can just really get into it. And, you know, there is some math out there, people who take advanced mathematics. When you get into differential equations and far beyond that, it's like, holy cow. Maybe if I had nothing but time, it would be interesting. But so you end up transferring to NYU. You decide you want to kind of follow in your father's footsteps in that business, because where you come from, you know, it's so interesting. The reason people choose entrepreneurship and how it's viewed. But what you mentioned before was like, it just wasn't allowed. And so to be able to do that is like, it's almost like an opportunity, where here, like in the US, it's considered a risk, because if you go in, I describe it as starting a business is like creating a system and you're trying to sell it to people and get people to come into it and make this system work. It's easy for you to jump into a system that's already working, where you're just kind of a plug and play and you just need to show up, learn the skill, and
Mhm.
keep somebody else's machine running smoothly for them. That's easy. To me, that's what I consider being employed is like. But when you want to do your own thing, it's considered riskier because it's much more difficult because there's all this buy-in and all this you have to do to get people interested to be those pieces in your plug and play. But when you said that, it was the first time I ever really looked at it as no, it's actually a privilege to get to be an entrepreneur.
I think for a lot of people in the United States, it is. And I think that here I may be different because 20 years after graduating from NYU, I was talking to, he was my best friend in college. We took the CPA prep course, which lasts, say, 8 or 9 months.
Hmm.
Every weekend we were getting ready to take that exam. And when we met, he said, Loo-beem, like, after so many years, and he went Deloitte and Touche, HBO, Merrill Lynch, he worked for
Yeah.
a big trading company in Moscow. And he went through all this corporate, then he went to Stanford, he got an MBA. So he's super smart and he's really like, in terms of corporate America, he is
Hmm.
that. And he said, you know what? I all the time, like now, I remember you saying you cannot work for anyone. You have to work for yourself. You cannot work for anyone. So for me, it was this thing from, I didn't remember that. Richard, I did not remember me being like that. But my friend who spent so much time with me, I said, really? He said, you talked about it all the time, that you cannot work for somebody else. It's like giving your most valuable asset, your time and your years, to somebody. You are brought up in a system. In the United States, we have a really strong system of education, and you are brought up with a lot of people who are prepared to fill in how you said it. Like, you come in and you just this perfectly functioning small part of a big machine. And one of the reasons that the United States economy is so strong is because we try to, create systems and then perfect them and then scale them up. We
Yeah.
create a system. If it's working, all we're doing is scale it up, scale it up, scale it up, get bigger, more, 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 more. But then you become an employee and you become that person who performs a function for the rest of your life. I am not like that, because life moved me. I'm going to be 50 next week, and I've been moved my entire life, and still I do not know where I'm going to live after November, because right now I am in Turkey and
Hmm.
my residency ends in November, and I don't know if they'll extend it. So the possibility of having to move to another country, it's a real deal for me. I will have to deal with it, and I have to address it, in my case, every year. So I think it's just maybe a lot of influence from my dad, because he was the first entrepreneur in the Soviet Union. We're talking about the country that existed for more than 70 years, and he was the number one guy. Like, he was the one of the first ones who probably started when it was still illegal.
Hmm.
Like, you don't talk to your kids about it, but I remember how it was. So mm, I think I think that if somebody has some idea and it like is really want to come out, like I call this, like we have this, it's like a compass. It tells us like I have something inside and I'm thinking about something, and then my head starts counting numbers, like balancing things, weighing things. But then you think about an idea and it has this like feeling. It could be in your heart. It wants to come out. I think that's the business that people need to explore. And running a business in the United States, I've met a guy, he had 6 kids. He was in my business, he had a financial planning practice. And
Hmm.
at that same time, he was a full-time accountant for a major corporation.
Mm.
So in the States, the only reason that people are not doing something is because they have some limiting belief that somebody told them that starting business is risky. I'd say, well, life is risky. We have 100% certainty that we will die. All of us, 100%. Nobody will escape that. So you can say, well, living is risky in itself. We can have accidents, we can have whatever, different things. But I think the biggest risk is not taking a chance on something that wants to come out of you while you're still alive and while you still can do it. And I think one of the reasons that I was able to check off all the goals on my list is because of now I get that feeling I'm doing it. I'm not even thinking. I've done it so many times that I know that I have to do it. And oh, by the way, I am just like everybody else, have to suffer and deal with the consequences when things don't work out. I don't have a trust fund.
Yeah.
I'm not financially independent anymore. I've been a few times in my life, but every time I start something new right now, it's like the first time. Well, I have a lot more life experience and I know how to do things, but the outcome, the financial outcome, is not guaranteed. And like you mentioned in the beginning, that chasing the money has become the game that everybody is so obsessed with that they miss out on a lot of things in life. And I think the human connection is one of the most beautiful things that we can have in life, and you cannot buy it with money. Now, this time that we're spending together, you can't. I had to say, by the way, for your listeners, I've missed it was 2 appointments. I missed 1 appointment.
It was only by
and then this one. And this one, I overscheduled the one before, so I'm really grateful that you were so flexible. And it's one of the things in life, things come up, and I'm really grateful that you were flexible and you rescheduled and postponed it. So that's part of being human being, understanding that things come up.
Yeah.
But chasing money all the time it's absurd.
Yeah, I think money is the byproduct of it. It's like, I've lost, in 2 years, I've lost 64 pounds and my body has changed shape.
Wow.
But that is a byproduct of the daily habits, So in a business, if you make money, it's a byproduct of the things you're doing daily that provides the service that connects to your people that you're trying to serve. And the better you serve them, hopefully money will be the byproduct of that.
Hopefully, yeah,
hopefully, but it's not guaranteed. But that shouldn't be the reason that you do or do not do it.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
What if you're the only person that has this one experience, that has this one message that the world needed to hear? Nobody ever thinks about that. Like, you might be the only person that's experienced this one thing. But we're all more alike than we are different. But, once you get to the US, how do you get to this point? You had so much kind of professional success, and I don't want to skip over that for the listeners. When you graduated NYU, kind of give us a little bit about your career up until you decided to do your own thing, because I think you were co-author with Steve Forbes,
yes,
I believe, and you have some accolades, besides skiing and whatnot, that got you here. So kind of walk us a little bit after graduation, a little bit of what your corporate life was like, some of your achievements, and then where you kind of decided, hey, I want to take all the risk.
Okay, so one of the things that's important to mention is be careful what you wish for. In other words, when you're wishing for things, be crystal clear. In my case, I mentioned we had 2 dreams. One was mine, that's to ski in the Olympics. And the other one was my dad's, for me to go to a great business school. I thought that if you go to a business school, you got to go to a business school in the financial capital of the world, which is New York City. And if I wanted to continue skiing, it's upstate New York. So I finished the community college, and then I get accepted to NYU, but I still want to ski. And I get to NYU and I realize that for me to ski, I have to make a 600-mile commute.
Oh,
And yeah, oh, and then I remember sitting there and I was in New York and actually I was trying to figure out how I'm going to do it because I was not ready to give up on skiing. Just the fact that I went to business school, it doesn't mean that I'm done. So this is what I did. I took all my classes that I ended on Thursday afternoon. And on Thursday afternoon, after my last class, I would walk to my dorm. I would change and I walk to the Port Authority bus station. I think it's on 47th, so on 42nd Street in Manhattan. I would take a bus to Albany, New York. That's 150 miles.
oh,
There, I would pick up my car and I would drive 150 miles. It's exactly 150 miles to Lake Placid, which is in the Adirondack Mountains. I would ski Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If it was not a competition season, I would go back to New York on Sunday night. If it was a competition season, we skied like in New Hampshire, Vermont, sometimes as far as Maine. And after you compete for Saturday and Sunday and you stay for the awards ceremony, it's impossible to go back right after. I tried a few times, but it's just really difficult. So I would sleep and I would catch the first bus and I would make it into the New York City for the morning classes on Monday. And I did that 600-mile commute every single weekend for more than 2 years just to make it to the Olympics. And when I did make it to the Olympics and I came back, one of my professors, he passed away. His name was Professor Hipscher. He was partner at Ernst & Young. He told me that I was the first person in the history of New York University Stern School of Business to qualify for the Olympic Games and being a full-time student. We're talking about I went to the Winter Olympic Games. So, you know, it seemed like two dreams could not be put together, but that's one of the things, you know, and I think Americans would believe in if there is a will, there is a way.
man.
And I had to give up on my college experience. I don't know what it's like to be in I went to college in New York City, and I don't know what that experience is like because I gave up on it. But after I graduated, because it was a year after the Olympics, I still had one more year to finish. I got all the jobs that I applied for, all the interviews I went for, people wanted to hire me. And I got hired with a company, I got hired for a trading company. And my first address of my employment was 50 Broad Street.
Mm.
And if you look at the original address for the New York Stock Exchange, I think it was like 12 or 14 Broad Street. Now it's in the corner of Wall Street and Broad Street, but my first job was 2 buildings away from the New York Stock Exchange. And then my big dream was to work in the World Trade Center. That was like a big deal to me because those buildings were such a symbol, you know, of success, of the most successful people in the history of this planet. You know, they lived in New York City and they built those magnificent towers. And the few months after I started working, a group of traders broke away and they joined another firm. And they asked me if I wanted to come and work in the World Trade Center. And I said, yeah, I'm coming with you. And I said, wait, you're coming. You're not even asking what the terms are. And I said, I don't really care what the terms are because I really want to work there. That to work in those buildings to me was more important than how much I get paid, how I get paid.
Because it
was
meant
just
something.
completely irrelevant.
You know what's interesting is this is going to sound crazy, but me as an American, when 9/11 happened, and I was asleep in a loft apartment, and my buddy goes, "Hey, a plane hit the World Trade Center," and I was like, "I don't even know what the World Trade Center is." But you got to remember that, for context, at this time, I was a person who was mostly cooking in kitchens, playing guitar. I didn't own television. This was just not my area. But I make this parallel and this mention and this honest truth because you're from a different country, but you're also in the financial world, and so it means something to you. But when he said, "Oh, another plane hit the Pentagon," I was like, "Okay, I've been to the Pentagon. I know what the fuck that means."
Okay.
And so I was like, "Okay, we got something's up here."
Going on, yeah.
And so it's interesting, you know, I get that from you because I realize, like, to me, financial shit meant nothing. I was not in that world. I did not care about anything like that when I was that age. I was too busy playing music, getting high, drinking, and whatever. And and so yeah, I get what it means. Like you said, that meant having gone to the schools you went to, coming from a different place, and the symbolism both of America and going, the titans of finance,
Yeah,
this is where
yes.
they are. This is what that means. And if I can get my foot in the door, all I need is my foot in the door. It doesn't matter what the salary is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what, exactly.
Give me
That's
the
how it
foot in the,
was.
give me a chance.
Yes, exactly. And if when I went to school in New York, like I the scheduler, if I still wanted to make it to the Olympics, so I really needed to train. And the only way you can train when you go to school, that amount of time and energy, is 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
That's the training time. And then you walk outside, and you look up and you could see them from anywhere. Daytime, morning, night, it doesn't matter where you were in New York City, you just look down. In my case, I was always north from the Twin Towers, but they were always there. It was just like rain, snow, it doesn't matter. They would show up, they could disappear. They were just such cool buildings. And I would run every day. I would run to Battery Park City
Hmm.
by the West Side Highway. That was my running path. I don't know if they still lock the park, but at that time there was a gate that was locked. The trees were not planted yet because Giuliani started planting trees when I was at NYU. There were little shrubs. Now there are big trees, and they really beautified the Battery Park City. It has like a pond with koi fish. It was not like that. It was not like that in the 90s. It was still run down, and that part of Manhattan was not. Yeah, you had that cool financial district, but then you go just a little bit further, you have Alphabet City. And for people who don't know what Alphabet City, it's where the ghetto was, it's where the projects were. It just was a really bad area. And I remember some mornings I would run to the gate, and the gate opened like at 4 or 4:30, or I don't know what time, but a lot of times I got to that gate when it was still closed. And I would just stand there, like there was Traveler's umbrella, and then there were the World Trade Centers. And to me, I was like, I I studied for the CPA exam. And you have school. It was my last year. You have school, and then the weekends we're studying for the CPA exams. And the only job I could get was on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge. There's a place called River Cafe. It's famous. It's in a lot of movies because you see the Brooklyn Bridge and you see the skyline. Everybody who worked at that restaurant were immigrants. 100% of the guys who were waiters, I valet park cars. That's the only job I could find with my schedule, to valet park cars. We had one guy who was an American. His name was Adam, and he wanted to become an actor on Broadway.
Hmm.
So it's all immigrants and one guy. And we have a lunch, and every lunch I would sit there and I would tell them, look, guys, one day I'm going to work in those buildings. Nobody, it was just like a movie joke.
Yeah.
No way, man. What were you talking about? How you valet parking cars? There's no way you're going to work. And then one day I walked in and I was like, there's the Brooklyn Bridge, there's the River Cafe. I mean, I can't really see it. I know it's there. And like I was working there, and now from up here, I'm looking down. I didn't need a paycheck. I didn't need the benefits, and I didn't have benefits because, it was like you eat what you kill.
Yeah.
I left the company and I went. I think that was my first experience of running my own business because I got a really good payout, and I had a $1,600 a month draw, meaning I had to pay it back. So when I started making money, all the money that was paid to me, I had to pay back. But I worked in the World Trade Center, and it was more motivation, to actually to get going and make the money. So World Trade Center was really special, and is and always will be a really special place. They erased it from the face of the earth, but they will never erase it from my memory. And to me, it was one of the biggest accomplishments and most meaningful things to go into that building and say, look, here's my World Trade Center ID, and I work there. And I can wear shorts to work too.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I didn't know that. So like
Well,
kind of
we
you left, so you leave a group, and when you go to work there, it's kind of like, I don't know much about the finance world, but you're kind of independent in a way,
mm,
and
I
you
was part
trade.
of the small. I was part of the small company. It was the time where
Hmm.
even big companies. It was we that period of time. It was right. I graduated in '99.
Hmm.
It was the end of the dot-com bubble.
Okay.
Life in America was so great that Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, they took off their suits, they took off their ties, everything. It was the casual era in finance. It was so casual that just, I don't know how many years it lasted, but we were tiny, we were small, and our boss didn't care if we came in shorts because he wanted us to make money.
It was all about the
So
job.
yes, it was about getting the job done, and we didn't have to. I didn't have to meet anybody. I sat at the computer terminal, and it was
Yeah.
all done already then via computer. So we didn't have clients. We didn't have anybody. It was only employees. It was privately owned company. Nobody cared how you dressed, really.
And so,
It looked strange next to the
were
suit.
you there on 9/11?
Um, I met my best friend from college. We studied
Hmm.
for the CPA exam together. He was working for Merrill Lynch right across the street, across the West Side Highway. I don't remember what number of the financial center, but right across the street was Merrill Lynch offices, and we were supposed to meet, but his boss kept him really late. So when we're done talking, it was middle of the night when we parted. And the next day was the first time when I was late for work. First time in my entire life, because one thing that my dad drilled into my head from when I was a child is that punctuality is the privilege of the kings. And that was the last time, it was the first time that I was late. And after that, every time I am late, I just call people and say, look, I am sorry I'm running late, but I stopped becoming obsessed with being on time. Because if I was on time on that day, I don't know how it would have worked out. But I was downstairs. I remember that um, digital cameras were a
Hmm.
really new thing.
Yeah.
And I am the guy I never win anything in raffles. And for that Christmas, so we're talking about Christmas of 2000,
Hmm.
we had a bag of presents. Like the office had the different presents, and we were just pulling a raffle, and I won a digital camera. And I remember going outside and they snapped the picture. It was like 8:59 or something. It was just a few minutes after our building was hit. But because I was in the subway, I didn't feel the impact. And when the second plane flew in the building, when your friend told you that the second, Pentagon. So first our tower got hit, which is North Tower. And when the plane hit the South Tower, it flew from the south side, and that flame, that smoke went to the north, towards, in the north, in the direction. And I was on the north side, and I felt that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was downstairs to answer your question. Sorry, it was a long answer, but
No,
I was
no.
going to work. I decided to get out one stop late because in New York City you could ride the subway to the World Trade Center is the stop. It still is the stop, and I could take the escalator to the elevator from the first floor. I go into like the 40th floor, and then I would take an escalator to the second elevator and go to, we were I think 83rd floor. So I had to take two different elevators, and I could ride a train from the A train is the longest train in New York City. And you can go from the Bronx, and I can go into my office on the 80th floor in the World Trade Center and not see a daylight. But that day I needed to get some coffee, and I was already late. So, oh well. I
Man.
got out one stop early and I watched it from outside. Mhm.
And I mean, of course, it's been a long time and we've learned so much from it. But I love kind of the little takeaway you said. I'm a very punctual person too, but I'm also like a very like shit happens. Like I always say, I always tell people like when I would lead a team, like, hey, let's be like palm trees, let's bend without breaking, you know? Um,
Mhm.
you just got to be fluid. Um, and how you kind of let that go. You know what? For whatever reason, the universe was just on your side that day, and being
Exactly.
late. And sometimes things are the way they are for a reason that we can't see. And kind of like you said, now you just kind of like, hey, if I'm running late, like when you emailed me and like, hey, we might go over,
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it.
Thank
I
you.
would rather, I would rather the conversation you're having with someone else play out the way it needs to for the people it needs to. Because if not, I'm doing that a disservice. But, you took that takeaway from it. Is there any other takeaway kind of interesting? Um, what did life look like that after? So obviously you didn't have a place, you didn't have an office to go back
Yeah.
to. How
Um,
how did your view change, and what kind of things did you decide to do, and what did you do moving forward?
so on that day, basically, um, we had neighbors I lived in New Jersey. I lived in Weehawken. So every
Okay.
day I took a boat to Manhattan from Hoboken. And our neighbors downstairs, they didn't like Jersey life, so they moved to New York. And the husband worked for Reuters.
Hmm.
And their house was like, they lived on the west side, like in 120th Street, so pretty far north. And I remember that cell phones didn't work and I needed to call home. Like all the cell phones were jammed. And there were few payphones that were working. And there were huge lines waiting there, like at the payphone. And I remember like I just walked up to the front of the line and I got my ID out, World Trade Center ID, and I said, look, I gotta call home. And people were like, please call. I called home, hang up the phone. I turned around and there was only one cab. Like everybody was walking. So after I called, I went north towards New York University. For people who are not familiar with New York City and New York University, well, World Trade Center is all the way south. It's Battery Park City. It's the very south tip of Manhattan. I went north towards NYU because New York University at that time was the second largest property holder after the Catholic Church in Manhattan.
Huh.
If you look at the Stern School of Business, the undergraduate school is maybe 9, 10-story building, and there are no classes in that building. All the classes are down below. We had like 2 or 3 levels of classes below. So I'm thinking, because at that time I didn't know, when the second building got hit, I thought it was like a terrorist attack, because before they tried to drive the vans
Yeah.
into the parking lot and they couldn't detonate them. I thought,
Hmm.
well, they finally are successful, they finally were able to do it. And what if they start blowing stuff up all around? Because, you don't
You
know.
don't know.
So I decided I'm going north to New York University because they have security. We're in a bunker. There are vending machines and payphones. And basically, I thought it was the safest place. You go underground and you're in your old university. So by the time I made it to NYU, I was clear on what was going on, because all the radios were on, the businesses were pushing TVs out, because there was a huge migration of people going through the
Yeah.
streets. Everyone was going north. And when I got to NYU, I actually watched the towers to come down from. When you watch movies about New York City, there is a white arc that they show. It's in a lot of romantic movies. Uh, Most romantic movies are shot in Washington Square Park under that white arc. And yeah, and when I saw the buildings collapsed, I went to see our friends who used to be our neighbors, but now they live in north. It's like 100 more blocks at least. It's a long way to go. And there was one cab. And I remember, like, I walked up to that cab and there were so many people that wanted to go. And again, like, I never use any benefits in my life. I don't feel like using any benefits. And at
Yeah.
that time, I remember I said, look, I gotta get home. I gotta get to my friends because they're waiting. There's no communication. You know, the
Right.
only way
And
was
I
to
was
find.
thinking about that, and for context for some listeners, um, some of you will perfectly remember, but I think it's important to remember for people that who are much younger than us that we didn't have the internet, cell phones, connectivity was not what it is today. Because you talked about payphones and you said it's underground. They're going to have payphones and vending machines. And a lot of people were like, well, at that time, and not knowing if it was a real terrorist attack because we did not have that connectivity. I mean, I remember
No.
waiting around and us driving into Houston going, how far do you want to get to Houston? Because it's an oil refinery place and blah, blah, blah. Is that where they would hit? I mean, it was a big deal. The
You don't
unawareness.
know, right?
You had so
Yeah.
much more, you had so many more things to factor in and account for because we didn't know, and much more was left to the imagination.
Yeah. No browsers, no apps, no Facebook, no WhatsApp, nothing.
But people knew because that's where it was in that district. Like you said, it showed to me like, hey, they knew that when you showed your World Trade Center ID, they knew, hey, that's the problem. Somebody's going to be looking for him. Let's let
Yeah.
them use the payphone. Because you know, as anybody knows, probably no, you're not going to kick somebody off a payphone in New York in that time. They're going to tell you to get fucked. You can go wait your turn. But, you know, as we know, during these crisis times, we see a lot of times often the better side of humanity that I wish we saw all
Yes.
the time. And
Yes.
that
And
kind of
that,
reminded me when you said that, that they're like, hey, you know, that meant something. And that they were willing to, hey, this person really needs to check in. And so, like you said, kind of continue on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you were talking about,
no, that was the perfect, Richard, you said the perfect thing because you mentioned an important word. We see the best part of humanity. After September 11th, I did make it to my friends in that last
mhm,
cab. And then we went, um, you basically can go west until you get to Hudson River. When you get to Hudson River, you look down south and you see the buildings were burning and the black smoke was going across the Hudson towards New Jersey, you know, to that side,
mhm,
towards the Statue of Liberty. It was going in that direction. So towards Staten Island and towards Jersey City. And I was looking at it and I'm a skier, you know, I love the outdoors. So going to New York, it was one of the goals that I had in my life that I accomplished. I graduated from NYU. I worked in the World Trade Center, but there is no more World Trade Center. So really, there is nothing for me to do. Few days after that, I packed up my car and I left and I went to Colorado. And from Colorado, I found an offer. I got an offer. I went to a place in California, but I didn't really like it because, not because I didn't like, I love California, but the culture in the company, it was totally different from New York. First of
yeah,
all, you have huge time difference.
yeah,
So second, you had this huge commute. So by the time you get to work, like it just, yeah, you have a lot of time in the afternoon, but our work is really stressful and I wasn't recovering. So I went back to Colorado to work for a company. And then I got an offer in Austin, Texas. And between that time, you know, because my place was destroyed and my work was destroyed in an act of terror, I was classified as a displaced person. And the American Red Cross sent me a check for $15,000. I never heard anything back. You know, they never asked me to give it back or anything. But I'm saying that Red Cross is one of the um, inspirations and models for Wings for Heroes. We'll talk about it later. But I left New York, you know, there was nothing to do for me. And then I went through different places and I went through a lot of hardship for many years, you know, to get back to where I was. Even first year after graduating from college, it took me 6 more years, 7 more years to get close. We're talking about financially. And
mhm,
in between that time, I started. So 2003, I get hired by American Express in Denver and I
mhm,
moved to Denver. I worked for them for 1 year. I set a lot of records that good luck to anyone beating those records because I worked like I trained for the Olympics. I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would go to my office, I would run there, I would exercise, I would shower, I would eat breakfast, and I would be already at work when people are waking up. I'm done with my, exercises. I'm ready to go. 8 o'clock, I would hit the phone and I would work till 11 o'clock. Then I would do paperwork and then I would repeat 4 o'clock in the morning next day.
What
I'm
gave
just
you that
saying that by
drive? What gave you that drive for the financial? Like I can see it for something you
I had
enjoy, like skiing, but like I mean, I know some people love probably financial stuff, but how was it a game to you? Is it just with everything, or did you just love the business?
it was my profession. I went to school for it and I worked in it. That's the only thing that I knew, and that's what I thought was my life. I made it my life. It wasn't, excuse me. I really love trading. That was really for me something for me, like if you're a type A competitor and you want to duke it out with guys who have big kahunas, that's the
Mm-hmm.
business because man, they'll roll over you like you just, look aside, finished. So I love the competitiveness of that.
Okay.
And then when I got hired by American Express, it was it going from Wall Street to Main Street.
Yeah.
Now,
Now,
Texas
how did
was
how did
still,
you do culturally? Because kind of like you said, I mean, for people unfamiliar with the world, I mean, you're definitely gonna have more people of your ethnicity and background in the Northeast, New Jersey, New York, and all that. Because you have Brighton Beach, which
oh,
has the Soviet kind of influence and all that. How did you
yes.
parse out in Colorado? Given your ethnicity and all that, were you able to find some community there?
No, I was not looking for the community because when I got a scholarship to the National Sports Academy, that was cutting the umbilical cord with all the past.
But
I
also,
married
but
an American girl. I went to American university. All my friends were Americans. I am an American. I am, by that time, well,
okay,
actually, I got my citizenship. I think it was 9 or 10 days after September 11th.
okay.
So, I
Well,
considered I can.
but you also being, but kind of being with the skiing and Olympic, like you also have another community that's not any cultural relation, which helps with assimilation. But I definitely, anything I think that can help, because whether or not it's a culture or anything, it's about finding a piece of you that connects to another piece of others. And oftentimes, whether it be through immigration or something like that, um, even in the military, like the, I would say like the military is like jail in a way. White people hang out with white people, Mexicans with Mexicans, and blacks with blacks. And you speak the same languages. And like in Japan, the Spanish people would speak Spanish on the trains because a lot of Japanese people speak English. So if you want to talk
Mhm.
about them, you talk Spanish or your language, you know? So yeah,
To answer your to answer your question, I never hung out with, let's say, my people from where I came
mhm,
from. And after going that, the first year is a brutal when you're
yeah.
learning the English and you have to learn the culture. There's a huge cultural difference.
Oh yeah.
It's more difficult. It took a lot longer to assimilate culturally, even though I was submerged fully. So there was not, that life was like never existed. I live here. I am in America. I am going to do whatever it takes. I want to be like these wonderful people that are helping me all the time. And that's my lens that I have, the
Yeah.
filter that I looked at America at was that first generosity. And maybe it's a universal thing that what you see is what you think you get more of. And I saw generous people who wanted to help me, and it went on forever. So when I got to Colorado, I already was over that. I was not fresh off the boat.
So yeah,
I already had a degree and I worked, and I didn't think of myself as an immigrant. I thought of myself as, I came from New York, then I went to this state, this state. I lived in Texas for a year before going to Colorado.
that's
So
where I'm
going to
at.
Colorado was like really, are you in Colorado or in
No, I'm
Texas?
in Texas. My wife and I, we lived in Austin, 2009, no, 2008, 2015?
I was 2002. I spent 2002. I spent in Austin, and then 2003, American Express hired me. But the thing is that I'm a skier, right?
Yeah, Austin,
So
no.
there is no snow in Austin, and I find myself every time I get that 1 week, I'm driving 20 hours to Colorado to ski. I would go to Beaver Creek,
Yeah.
and now I have a chance to work
Oh,
in
yeah.
Denver.
Man.
There was no, it was a no, it was not a
Oh,
decision.
yeah.
It was
So
a place to be
how
for
did you
me.
like your time at American Express, and how did that play out, and kind of where did you go from there?
It gave me a lot of structure, Richard. It gave me the corporate structure that I really needed to start my own business. So 2003, at the end of the year, I got so busy that I didn't have time to spend with my existing clients. It was all about getting new clients. And in 2004, I had death in the family. Like my stepmother died, and I was in New York for a funeral, and I talked to my best friend at that time. Um, he said, Loo-beem, can you do better than what you're doing right now? I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And he said, well, then you got to do it right now. And he was a rabbi, my best friend was a rabbi. We were the same age. He had 5 kids, I had none. He was religious, I was more spiritual. At that time, I was
Yeah.
not religious, neither spiritual. We're talking about 2001, 30-year-old, it's just.
Yeah. We're trying to make
But
it.
he said, listen, nobody in the history of the world has driven in a brand new car in their startup business. And I think he used the Mercedes. Says nobody drove a brand new Mercedes in the startup business. So the faster you start, the faster you're going to get there. And I went back to Denver and I brought my resignation to American Express right there and then. And I said, I'm starting my own business.
Well, let me ask you something, because this is something um this is something that bothers me about American corporations and in the healthcare industry I was in. You mentioned this point. You're good at what you do, but you reach this impasse. You have no time to spend with your existing clients because you're too busy trying to get new clients. Now, I
Yes.
was in healthcare, and healthcare is a business, and even though it's a people business, there's always this growth factor. And one of the lead physicians I worked with, he would always say, like, the corporation's always like pushing me to grow, grow, grow. If you're not growing, you're dying. And he's like,
Yeah.
I just don't believe that. He's like, because his patient panel would get so big that he doesn't have time to service the people that make him who he is, what he is, the best at what he is. Um, and the company loses sight of that. He pushes back against it and is like, I don't need to grow or whatever. He kind of plays this game. He's like, I just shake my head and do what I want. But that's kind of a corporate, that more excess we talk about is you had no time to spend with the relationships that you had already cultivated because you're too busy trying to get new ones. How did you feel about that? And did that factor into deciding to leave?
So I have a specific answer. The guy who hired me, he had some health issues that he was going through, and the office was kind of, I think we were like 129 out of 130 something American Express offices in the country. We were at the bottom. He was a really cool guy. He was really, but when the person has health issues, you just can't do it. So he got removed. And before he got replaced, or before they found him a replacement, they sent corporate people from Boston. We called them the Gestapo. And I remember I formed a partnership with another advisor because, there was too much work to do for one person. And I said, okay, I'm going to do marketing, you do the servicing and, sales and servicing. So we formed this partnership. On Saturday, we had to come in. They called it the phone clinic. You had to dial the phone and make appointments on Saturday. Somebody tells you, like, you working for the corporation, you come in, you dial the phone from 9 o'clock till 1 o'clock. It was not a full day, but they want us to come in and dial the phone. Well, I had a client who was doing a fundraiser for some kind of, she was doing a cancer walk or cancer run, and she got all of her friends at their home. They were doing barbecue and they did raffles and whatever. They were just trying to raise money for cancer. And I went to that event. And when I came home, when I came to my office, I had a picture of my office and I said home.
That's terrible.
Whoa, I lived there. It's true. I lived there from 4 o'clock in the morning till midnight. It was like my home. So I come to the office and I have an official letter. It's like a record, like you were not official record. If you have one more, blah, blah, blah. It stayed. They gave me a warning because I was not in the phone clinic to make appointments with people who never heard of me, who were relaxing on their weekend, while I met hundreds of people at the fundraiser that my client invited me to. And I looked at this letter and I was like, what is this thing? You know, that was like the first. But then I became number one. And then I become number one in the office by working really hard, and nobody really said anything. You know, just shut the door in my manager's office, say like, "Dude, I'm working." But that time, you know, it was like really, they expected me. They wanted me to find new clients, and even if I was looking for clients my way, it's not that it was not good enough. It was punishable, and to me, it was just ridiculous. You know, I just couldn't understand that. If I was drinking or if I didn't show up, if I was sleeping, I was with people.
Yeah.
And plus it was something important to my clients. So then it was just like, after that, it was just, you know, I really worked really hard because I wanted to become number one. And I have this thing about, if you put me in a competitive environment and you make numbers, I'm going to be climbing. I'm going to be climbing, like, it's just, I don't know why. It motivates me more than money. Yeah, I guess it's being an athlete because you always want to make it to the podium.
But I think it's also a sense of personal pride and respect. I mean, some people have it and some people don't. It's like, I always say, like, I'm the kind of person that likes to win. Like, if me and you, if we're going to play tic-tac-toe, yes, I want to win, you know? Not that I don't like you or not that I hate you. It's just like, that's just me. Of course I want to win. And there's a difference of playing to win versus playing not to lose. And, you know, maybe it's, you know, I took martial arts from a young age. And so potentially it's that same spirit. But yeah, I agree. And I love to have it kind of as a healthy thing, but it's kind of that concept that no matter what you do, you're going to give it your all and you're going to rise to the top no matter what you do, because it's really just who you are. Anything
it's a character.
You want to do, it's worth doing right. I mean, if you want the best results it could be, then you need to put 100% of the effort. You know, I mean, if you put half-ass effort into a project, then don't be surprised if it doesn't turn out
that it doesn't work out.
But so after you
so just to finish it, Richard. So just to finish, because you know we almost answered the question that you asked. So basically here I'm acquiring clients, and it's not good enough for the company the way I did it. There was a little disconnect, and then I had a deal with my manager. They brought a new guy, and he said, "Okay, if you make these numbers, which were not achievable, nobody has done it before," he said, "I'll give you management." And I met the numbers and he said, "Well, I cannot give you the management because you've been here too little and everybody else is going to say, well, it doesn't look good." And in reality, the whole office was behind me because they've seen what I've done, and nobody questioned that I am the right person for that position. But anyways, he said no. Then my stepmother died. I go to New York. My friend says, you know, you gotta do it now. Don't wait for anything. And I go back to Denver and I hand in the resignation. And the next step were, you know, stock options. And it was really lucrative. My next step in the career would have been super lucrative. And instead I start my own business and I end up homeless for more than 1 year. I'm building my business on nothing, you know, on the idea that I can do better. But the reality is that I don't have a home to live. And then we go from shelter to shelter trying to find a place to live. I think that's when I discovered what happiness is. And the happiness for me that I share with everyone is saying, you started this conversation perfectly, that, you know, that we chase money and we accumulate. At some point, it's just adding zeros. You know, you're not really adding quality to your life. You're not getting new experiences. You're not getting anything new except comma, zero, zero, comma, zero, zero, zero. That's all you're adding zeros in your life. You're not adding ones.
And value.
And it was Christmas, yeah, Christmas of 2004. We were at, it was like extended stay motel next to a highway. I remember these truckers going by on their brakes, you know, they're braking. But we had a roof over our head, and we were sitting on the floor eating organic chicken. And that, to me, like, I remember that time. I remember like walking in, and like we had a home for the night, for the most important night of the year.
Right.
It's Christmas, right? And we have organic chicken on the floor, sitting on the floor, eating that organic chicken. Now, fast forward whatever years until I made it. I had so much money coming in that I was trying to push it into next year so I don't have to pay the tax in April. So if you push your, you know, if the business closes after the new year, you have a year and 4 months to write that check. And I remember that I really wanted to get some things, you know, and I get all these things and I have all this money, but like the relationship that I had with the most important person in my life, because we went through so much hardship and I had to work so hard and like separate and sacrifice, that like you drift apart normally. And then no money in the world. I remember like, I'm just like, I finally, after so many years like of struggling and working so hard, like I'm financially independent. I don't have to go to work, you know, like I have business coming in. It's all done. I just have to wait until the money comes in. I really didn't have to work because, you know, I packed the pipeline so much.
Right.
But I lost the most important thing. And I am saying, here I was, 2004, like I had nothing, you know, looking for a place to live, and having organic chicken for Christmas was a huge deal. Fast forward like 4 years or so, it's one of the most miserable memories of my entire life, having all the money that I could imagine and not having the relationship. So chasing the money for the sake of money is the recipe for disaster and a huge disappointment.
Well, because you know, the thing is I always equate this to my wife and I. We've been together 19 years, and I can remember when we were like, when it was like my roommate, we lived in this company housing and he left the company, and so he left, so we had to leave. And like it was like within 1 week we moved to Austin, but it was like this, you know, library memberships to do movies, and it didn't matter what we were doing or where we were, as long as we were together and we did this thing together, took this chance and this leap together. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And you know, you get kids and you make money, you lose money, you do all kinds of stuff in between, and it's like, but you know, it's important to remember that, kind of like you said, sitting there with that organic chicken, you don't have much, you have what you need for the night, but you got each other. And like us, you know, watching the Sopranos DVD set that we got from the library because that's all we could afford. You know, but hey, we were together, and you know, we need to get back to that it's the connection and the time together that's the real prize, and that this other stuff doesn't matter. We can acquire resources, people can trade resources, you can give it, but we got to quit trading our time for what we think is the resource that we need, when really what we need is kind of more time and stuff together. You know, it doesn't need to be the most expensive this or that, you know, or getting back to this time of, you know, talk about trading, of like, hey, like I'll give you a haircut and you give me a steak, you know, because you do beef and I cut hair. But it's like an exchange of energy and other things that we're much more than the number we make in our bank account and whatnot.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think you only can find that out by being in both places. because it's really hard to take somebody's word for it, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to take somebody's word and say, look, this is enough, and protect that time. Like when you go for more, there is always a trade-off. You're going to have to trade something, and most of the time it's going to be the time that you could have spent, like you said, with your kids, with your wife. But
Yeah.
people trade that without even thinking about it.
No, it's almost like a social conditioning, and
Now it is.
Yeah.
Now it is more than ever. Now it is more than ever. I've been away from the States for 10 years.
Oh.
And I saw it. I went back in October the first time, and I was like, wow, this is a different world. First of all, everything is done so you can work. In America, everything, the government has done everything. You do not go to DMV and wait for 4 hours. If you go to DMV without an appointment, they're not going to let you through the door.
Yeah.
They're not. There is a big lady with a board, and I said, look, here's my ticket. I spent this much time in Ukraine, and I just flew in. I just have a few days. I cannot make an appointment. I need to renew my license. I don't have a driver's license. You're not on the list. Shuts the door. Bye-bye.
It's like too cut and dry, no exceptions. But
it's a system.
Yeah, after you quit that, so what's the first business that you kind of started when you decided to do your own thing?
From American Express, I went and I opened a financial company, and that's what I ran. You know, I had my own practice until I left, so it was almost 12 years of my own.
Mm-hmm.
I was a registered investment advisor, my own, and you know, the claim to fame is that I went through 2008, 2009, and none of my clients lost any money, because one of the degrees I have is an accounting degree. Mm-hmm. And I was taught where to look for things, and I was just sitting there digging through numbers in financial statements and annual reports, and I found a $50 billion loss buried in the footnotes of Citigroup. And I said, well, if Citigroup, if they have that, then everybody has that. And I called my clients and I said, look, this is what's going on. And one of my clients said, yeah, you know, I just heard about this Nina loans. And I was like, what? He says, yeah, no income, no asset. You basically write how much you make, how much you have. You can write $1 billion and they're going to say, oh, okay, approved. So at the end of before the financial crisis exploded and everything melted down, mm-hmm. People were getting mortgages by writing how much they're making. And, you know, at first they couldn't make the third payment, then they couldn't make the second payment. And the story went on that at the very end, people were getting mortgages and they couldn't even afford the first payment.
Wow.
That's how far we went with, you know, creative financing before the 2008, 2009 crisis. So basically all the rules were thrown up.
Who benefited from that? Because it's always...
Oh, bro, all the financial institutions, all the big investment banks, anybody, what they were doing was that they were tranching it. They would create tranches, so layering. So for example, it would be hard to make it because it's been such a long time, but let's say I have, the math will not add up, but let's say I have $100, right? Mm-hmm. And for that $100, I can take $5 and invest it in the complete garbage, and take the $95 and invest it in the governmental US treasuries or US bonds, something that is issued by the US government, or maybe like A-rated corporate, like highly financially stable companies.
Right.
But that 5% was a total garbage. It was that subprime, those loans that were super risky. But if I combine them and say, look, if I hold it to the end and this little part, that $5 becomes a zero, and I wait until the end, then the interest that the government or the A-rated company will pay me will be the same 100 that I started with. Therefore, I have an A-rated package. And then 5 became 10, 10 became 15, and then nobody was looking. And, you know, Moody's and S&P, the rating agencies, they were making huge money by keeping those ratings high. Investment banks were making huge money by packaging all that stuff. We could talk Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. Lehman Brothers, they don't exist, but so all the investment banks, all the mortgage brokers, all the mortgage companies, everybody, that machine was turning. Even the AIG, American General, the insurance company, it was the best company. It was the best. That company was so awesome. Greenberg, his last name, I'm forgetting. Al Greenberg, I think, the man who started it, he was a genius. He built such a strong insurance company. They were solid. But then they started insuring those mortgage bonds, and they got in huge trouble. So everybody was making money on paper. They were just turning, packaging. It was a huge manipulation on every single level, and it was ridiculous. It was
the next one,
unreal that it happened in America.
The one I read about last night that was the crazy thing, and that's kind of why I told my wife I was so where we live and have property, I'm like, it's the last land grab that all these companies are trying to buy up land to make housing things so that individuals cannot buy land. Well, apparently somewhere in California, there was an article that a company, I guess they bought this property and they put a development on it, and to entice the buyers, they said that they would pay for the neighborhood's water for whatever. They stopped paying in 2019, and so now the residents took over the watering thing, and they have till tomorrow, I guess, to decide. But their monthly water bill will go from $141 to $599. All because this company who bought this property and built these things to entice the home buyers said, we're going to do this. And then once they couldn't afford to keep up with it, they stopped paying it. And now there's the whole debt of the thing. And then everybody who bought all that, they're either stuck there with a home that, it's just, and that's the thing is you always have to look and go, well, when you think you're getting something of value, you still need to ask, well, who's benefiting from it? Now, if it's something real that's like an equal transaction of hey, I'm getting a good meal, and who's benefiting is, hey, the chef and the business owner, then all that's fine. But when you talk into something that's like a big asset, like your home and property and loans and all this, where there seems like there could be anything backdoor, underhanded, you need to go, well, what's their motivation for doing this? Why would they really give me this good of a deal? They wouldn't. Trust me, they're out to make money. If that's their goal, is to make money, they're not going to give you that. So beware and beware.
Never. And I can write a book on what you just said. We talked about the biggest financial crisis. It was it's first of all, the interesting thing is that people were really drunk or high on how much wealth was created and how well everything was doing, when in reality it was a Mickey Mouse. It was just it was a huge Ponzi scheme. It was just, when they stopped, it all blew up. And you had to live through that to know how fast and how easy people were making that money. Their property values were going so fast. People were taking second mortgage, third mortgage, fifth mortgage. It was mortgages, buying cars, everything. It's everyone got high on that thing and went crazy. And here I am saying, look, we cannot do this. I want to grow the business. No, we're not going to buy the house. I was just saying, no, we cannot do this. And then at the end of the day, you look like it was a huge, you had to live through that. When the bottom fell out and the music stopped playing, there were no chairs left around to sit down.
Yeah.
Everyone thought that they had such a great deal. Everyone was such a great real estate investor because real estate investments were going to the moon, Austin, Denver, in Arizona. It was just California. All these markets were just exploding. And it was all hot air, hot air balloon. And what you said is very true. Like, first, we talked about that whoever's listening, first of all, if your kids have skills, right, they will need those skills, and those skills that you are teaching them right now, they will be with them forever. And when the opportunity comes, there were two people standing looking at one opportunity. One has skills and one has not. The one who has skills will always win. They may be temporary, you know, the nepotism or whatever, you get lucky, but at the end, the ones that have skills will win. And the second one that you said is just now, if something is too good to be true, and especially it's concerned with money, you really got to dig deep. You got to remove the fluff and see what is the whole picture, and how is that the water bill that is $100 now, it's going to be 600. Like, what is the worst case scenario? Like, my clients told me, Loo-beem, we like you because you're always paranoid. And I said, I'm not paranoid. I lived in the Soviet Union. I saw my grandparents, my grandmother would go to the market. We didn't have markets, you know, we had bazaar. You go to the bazaar. She's in her 70s. The guy tells her how much the meat cost. She would take that chunk of meat and she would, boom, throw it at him. And she would be USOB. Yesterday, it was 20, 40, 80, 200. My pension, she said, it has not changed. I cannot buy 1 kilo of meat. All the savings that people had in the Soviet Union in the savings account, it disappeared one night. Everything was great. I'm just saying it's not going to happen in the United States. Our system is really top notch, but I'm saying I lived through that stuff, so I am naturally looking for what you said. Like, what's the other side? Like, what are they not showing to us?
Being exposed to that, you know, because I always say, like, it's never you until it's you. It never happens until it's you. And, you know, the value of experience, having been in certain circumstances, is that you then have a viewpoint of how to assess something and move forward. And the fact that, you know, one, having grown up the way you did, that's one unique viewpoint. And then also as an immigrant, and then NYU, the whole World Trade Center experience, you know, these are all unique viewpoints. And I think, you know, definitely what my show, one aspect is perspective, viewpoint and perspective. You know, can change a lot of things, and conversation. Because we need to realize, like, hey, how good we have it or how good we don't, but also, hey, if we can help each other avoid, like, not, you know, making sure that we have a place to sit when the music stops, because all the people who aren't paying attention won't. But so you started doing financial planning, and you kind of constantly, you know, that's been one of your sources of income. That's your occupation, something you're good at and whatnot. Where do you get into wanting to do Wings for Heroes? Because
you and I, we're still in the United States. So basically, after after 2009 financial crisis, about a year later, I got a call and I got invited to Steve Forbes's Success in the New Economy Symposium. Because
what is that?
It was 2011. It was in New York. Basically, it was clear that things have changed. You know, we saw a financial system that worked for so many years, and we had this greatest country in the world, and then suddenly somebody just, you know, all the rules were thrown out of the window, and people got greedy, and corporations got greedy, and investment banks and regulators and rating agencies, like, and banks and mortgage companies, like, everyone was in it. So it was like a systemic failure. Like, it was a change in the system. So his symposium was Success in the New Economy. How are we doing things differently?
What is the symposium? Is this like an annual thing? And who is Steve Forbes?
No, he was.
I've heard the name. I've heard of Forbes magazine, but what does this represent?
Yeah, he's the guy. He's the guy who is in charge of the magazine. He is the 2 times presidential candidate, and he is the big name in the finance. So he basically got a bunch of people who were experts in their field, and I was the youngest guy in the room. I didn't know what I was doing there, but I think I started a radio show when I got all my clients out of the market. I spent a lot of time on going on my radio show talking about things that were going on, not just with the mortgage, but I saw that the government is getting bigger, that the regulations are being, the important regulations that were safeguarded for so many, decades. Suddenly nobody's looking, nobody's checking. And as an accountant by training, it was like, if you imagine an engine and somebody drops a wrench in there, like they drop a wrench in my engine. And I was really open about it and saying, look, it cannot work like this. It cannot work. And this thing is just from a guy who cannot make his first payment, getting the mortgage, to all the way to the Oval Office. Everybody was in it. But because it was generating so much wealth, American dream, everyone is getting a house, yeah, okay, it's a dream, but I had to work for my dreams, and here people are just signing it. And I was married at that time, and my wife wants to buy a house, and she's like, Loo-beem, we're doing well. Like, what? And I said, it's not the right thing. And I explained it. She said, okay, cool, grow your business. We're going to be renters. We're not going to buy a house. And everybody around you buying new cars and the bigger home and the bigger home. And you feel like an idiot, like I'm thinking like, I know that this is wrong, but it lasted for a long, long time. That bubble inflated, it went on for years. So after presenting, and the only thing that I remember about that symposium, number one, I felt strange going back to New York City after 10 years, being in Times Square, because there's so many people. And the second thing, I don't even remember what I said on stage, because all I saw, it was like these bright lights shining at me, and there was a clock. And I remember the guy who was in charge, he was like trying to rush me, but I had to speak. I have these lights, and I see the timer is running out, and it was just like out of body experience. And when I left that room, like when you're really nervous, you start perspiring, like when you present on stage. My pants were wet, like somebody dumped a bucket of water on me. I was soaked, man. I was just like, I walked out and I was like,
I don't
know what happened to
you. You don't know if you breathe. I know, like, I've had those moments when you talk in front of people on stage and you're like, you felt like you didn't even breathe while you were up there.
I thought I was died, and I was looking a movie. Like I was looking at myself from the outside, and the guy's like showing me wrap it up, and I was like, I can't wrap up. I need to finish. But anyways, apparently I did really well, or relatively well, that I got an offer to contribute to the book that Steve Forbes was putting together, and that came out in 2014. It became a bestseller. All the proceeds went to charities, so I made nothing out of it. And the following year, I got invited to speak with Brian Tracy at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. And Brian Tracy was the first guy who showed me how inadequate I was when I started working for American Express, because he sent his salesperson to sell tickets for himself. And that guy I've never seen anybody speak like that. Like, he did whatever he wanted with that room. Like, he was in charge. And at some point he told us, like, stand up and go like this. And he's like, stop. He said, guys, look at yourself. You're like all grown up people. This is American Express. And you're doing this stupid stuff. Like, I said, why are you doing it? And we're like, because you told us to. He says, exactly. That's why you need to come and you need to learn. And that's how he was selling tickets for Brian Tracy's event. And he made such an impression to me that I became a student of whatever Brian Tracy put together. I think I bought all his programs, and I learned and I practiced and I went on stage. And here I get an invitation to like share a huge stage. So after that, I was like, man, we're going to make some serious money. And I end up in Ukraine, I didn't monetize on that. I just, I went to Ukraine as an American because we can do whatever we decide to do.
And what year was this?
2015. So I spoke at the UN. I think it was it was in June. It was right before my 40th birthday, and then a few months later, I was in Ukraine, temporary, and then I accepted the permanent position without realizing that the war is for real. Like, it's a war, but we're on the Western side. But
Okay.
it's a nationwide company, and then I go east, and I'm like, oh boy,
So kind
this
of
is for
when did
real.
so I'm trying to link up everything. So 2015 is when I moved from Austin and took a management job, and I was in graduate school getting a master's in healthcare administration with a 1 year old. So my life was chaotic. I know about kind of Russia, Ukraine. I mean, I got laid off 9 months into the pandemic. So
Hmm.
everything has been kind of mismatched blur of my own personal journey since then. But I know there's been I'm no historian, no expert on this, but I know there was an initial thing with Crimea, which isn't that a
Crimea
part
gets
of it?
annexed in 2014.
Okay, so
2014, Crimea get annexed, and they get
so
there the next year.
so because I know there's a more recent thing of when everybody started the
Okay,
support with Ukraine, that's more recent, but also I know it's
okay.
been a while because time has been in this weird ass warp. But what was going on in
Can I fill it
2015?
in?
Yes, fill it in,
So
please.
basically, 2014, Russia annexes Crimea,
Okay.
and the war started in 2014, but there were no flags. So Ukraine was fighting green soldiers, and the green soldiers had no
And
flags.
this is
It
not
was
what
called
we're
the
hearing, this is not because I'm saying there's shit that goes on that doesn't pick up on our radar as Americans in the US. I mean, not all my
it's
listeners are
nobody
from
said
there.
anything.
Right.
Richard, nobody said anything. Putin takes Crimea, nobody says anything. Then he moves his army to the East Ukraine, and
Hmm.
they're actually fighting. There is a war going on, but it's called a terrorist operation because the soldiers that are attacking Ukrainians, they have no flag. You cannot tell where they're from. They took off the patches, and Russia is denying that it's their soldiers.
Mm.
So they're fighting 2014, and then when 2015 I stayed, and it actually, you see, that's how Wings for Heroes, the beginning was that
Well,
I was one of the
what is
guests.
your occupation in 2015? You got invited to speak, all this, you decide to leave
Yeah, I'm
this
done in the
American.
United States, so I'm finished. I walk off the stage, and then 2 months later, I'm in Ukraine. I
And
went
what's
to
your
see my
job in
dad
Ukraine? What's your job in
in
Ukraine?
Ukraine. I'm CEO. I'm the boss. I'm the number
Of
one guy running the nationwide infrastructure company. We had over 90 gas stations and 2 oil terminals, total 50 million liters of diesel or gasoline. It's a smaller one of the nationwide major companies.
okay.
And it's a huge, it's in, it, this, at that time,
Hmm.
nobody was on the Ukrainian side because there was nobody who accepted responsibility on the other side. Like the whole world knows it's Russia, but Russia is saying, no, it's not us. They're sending their troops into Ukraine. They annexed Crimea, and they're saying it's not us. So you're fighting like it's a phantom. It's an
Right.
imaginary. So the world, you know how difficult it was to work? I need diesel, right?
Hmm.
I need to buy trainload of diesel. And first of all, nobody would finance it. Okay, you find financing, people would financing, then nobody would insure it because how can you calculate risk of sending a product into a country that is not that has some terrorist operation that occupies a huge part of the country,
This is
but you don't know who you're fighting?
this is important for people to understand because I'm thinking about this as I sit here in the comfort of the 12 acres I grew up on in a free country, and you, as the listeners, sit wherever you are that are free and don't live in a place where we just show up at the gas station, and unless it's a hurricane or something, maybe we know that there's trouble getting gas. But people forget that in some places, this is a thing when you rely on other countries, whether other places for your oil, gas, be it food, for the people of your country. It has to be transported there. It has to be insured, because what if a natural disaster, a train gets derailed? You don't want to pay for it, and you want to make sure you're going to get compensated or get the product you paid for if something unexpected happens. So people don't understand that. And so I wanted to pause for a second and go really think about that and put that into perspective, because um, we believe that everything arrives in our grocery stores and our gas pumps. We don't know every step it went through to get here.
It's a really long process and long chain until we get that gasoline and diesel into our gas station. It's amazing. So for any company, even if you find the money, like in our case, you find the money, somebody who would finance that diesel or gasoline, but without insurance, if any company loses a train load of that product, it can put out of business major corporations, and forget about some company that is struggling in the middle of the war. So, our situation was, for anybody who's interested in operations, every morning I had a dispatcher who called by the phone to 92 gas stations to get the numbers. She got the numbers, they put it in the spreadsheet, they gave it to a person who could go and call everybody and see who can give us the product. So by the time I came with like around 9:30, we're deciding who sold how much and how many gallons they can get today. Right. And if we miscalculate one day, the whole company could stop. That's how it was. I spent first few years just really trying to make sure that we live tomorrow. Forget about long-term plans, forget about expansion, reconstruction, whatever it was. We have to operate tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And then that is the most exhausting way to live, because you can't plan anything. And every day some new problem shows up. European Union, we're not insuring this. Then there is no credit, there is no support. It's like everything stopped. The whole world turned away. Now, in 2016, I was at one of our gas stations and I saw a double amputee who came back from the war that was not existing, right? We didn't know who they were fighting on the other side.
Well, this didn't actually happen because nothing's actually going on. My
right,
legs
and that guy lost his legs not in the war. Yeah, he's not in the war. He just lost it fighting terrorists, But I saw a double amputee roll out from one of our gas stations near the highway. And he goes towards the highway. And I'm thinking, where is this guy going? Because you cannot walk there. There is no pedestrian way. So he rolls away. I'm carrying on with my stuff. And then it was less than half an hour. Huge thunderstorm came. I mean, that thing was massive. So I get one of our drivers. We get a pickup truck. Said, we're going in the direction where that guy rolled. We find him on the side of the road. He's a huge mess. Wet, mud. Nobody stopped, all the trucks are going by, splashing him. He's stuck in the... We take his wheelchair, we put it in the back of the truck. We get the guy inside. Richard, have you ever been next to people that even if you clean them up, there is not much life left in them?
Yes.
Like they're here, but there's nothing. It's just, before you die. And that's how bad of a shape he was. We drove him to wherever he needed to go. It wasn't his home. We drove him to a place in our town. We got him smokes. We got him some food. And I really think that that's the last act of kindness that guy saw. So, it's like my childhood during Afghanistan war. Now we're like 35 years later. It's the same thing that is going on, He's been used up and just discarded completely. It's 2016. Now, the full-scale invasion started in 2022. That's when Russia said, okay, we're putting back on our flags and we're going to bomb the whole country. And by the way, Ukraine's being under Russian attacks every night. 200 drones, 300 drones, ballistic missiles, they're bombing hospitals, residential areas, everything. They are not looking, they're just blowing everything out. In 2022, I was watching, I think it was like Instagram or whatever. I saw this girl, young girl, she's a teenager. She walks out in the middle of the packed stadium on her brand new prosthetic leg, limps out, stands in front of all the people, and she said, look, they can take part of our land, they can take our country, they can take a part of my body, but they're not going to break me. And that stadium blew up. And that was the moment when Loo-beem said, okay, I'm done thinking that I should do something. That's the moment I decided that Wings for Heroes it wasn't Wings for Heroes at that time. It was like, I'm done thinking, I'm doing.
Okay.
That was the moment, you know, that guy. And then 6 years later, it's the connection. It was 6 years I was thinking that I should do something.
What were you doing during the 6 years? Because that's exactly what I was going to ask.
Working.
Just working.
Working.
And what else what else was going on? Did anything
learning how to fly paragliders in my, you know, free time.
And how did that get on your radar, flying paragliders? How did that become a hobby or something you're pursuing?
So
because
it was same year, 2016 for Christmas, because, you know, we had such a dire situation that I couldn't take salary. You know, if I took salary, then we couldn't get diesel to a gas station, and if the gas station goes dry, to restart it, it's like starting a new business all over. It's extremely expensive. It's just, you cannot have that happen. So I wasn't taking a salary, and the company, everybody knew that I'm a skier. And for Christmas, they sent me, the whole company pitched in. We had over 2,000 people. I had more than 2,000 employees. They pitched in and they sent me to ski on Christmas to Austria. So I'm walking into my hotel, I'm checking in the hotel, and I see tandem paragliding. I was like, okay. I check in, I get my key, I turn around, and I see another one. And I was like, well, I've never seen an advertisement like this. But now I see two. So I grabbed that ticket and I go. I remember I just dropped my stuff in the room. I didn't even unpack. I called and I say, hey, I want to fly. The lady said, come back, come tomorrow. I said, okay. So I showed up tomorrow. She said, this is your pilot. And he says, okay, have you done it before? I said, no. He says, well, me neither. It's a stupid joke that all the pilots make around the world, but we take off and the earth disappears. I mean, the chairlift was like this, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna die. I don't even know this guy. I am dying. I said goodbye to my dad. I said goodbye to my brother. And then I was like, stop. We're gonna land, it's cool. I talked myself out of panicking and I enjoyed the scenery. It was really beautiful. But when we landed, I was like this, man. Like, my head is fine, but my hands are going. And I used to ski jump. I thought, you can't scare me. And that really scared me. And I knew that I'd need to learn, to fly by myself and then get good enough so I can fly passengers. And here's how I put it together. I said, let me scare an amputee veteran to death. So for a short moment, they'll forget that they're missing legs. That was the original idea.
But what makes you, I find this interesting because, so last summer when we were in South Padre, I did the reverse slingshot, which dropped it,
Yeah.
it bounces.
I saw those. Yeah.
But the point is we were riding the go-kart and I saw that thing and I go, I want to be scared. I want to feel alive. It's been a while. And I can remember on my 40th birthday in Myrtle Beach being on the sky wheel. And even though I had jumped out of a plane before, for whatever reason, this is 21 years later, 22 years later, I've jumped out of a plane, but being in a sky wheel is making me nervous when it moves a little bit. And so then when we were down there, I was like, I feel like I need to be scared. I want to feel alive. And so I want to know, because you had two choices. You could have been like, I never want to do this again because it was scary, or I want to do this and now I want to do this for other people. What do you think it is about yourself that why you decided that no, I want to be scared. I want to tackle it. Was it a conscious decision of I'm going to do things that I'm afraid of because of some of your past experiences of, like walking away, being on time, this and that, or what is it?
One of my friends explained this to me. He just said, Loo-beem, you're the guy who cannot live with his fears. Where me, I would rather go to the gym. That's how he said it. And I really thought about it, and it's true. Like when somebody really scares me,
Mhm.
I think it's an internal mechanism that makes me want to prove that I can do it. That the fear will not, the fear
Stop you.
in itself is not the thing that's going to stop me. Now, I will think twice before doing it. I'm not a Yahoo, and I spent a long time, it took 6 months, 7 months before I found the best school that I could
Well,
find, the
you
best place. I
calculate
researched
risk
it.
by nature of your
Yeah,
job.
but it scared me so much, and I see people are doing it, right? The guy who flew me, he was like
Mhm.
60. He's a strong Austrian guy, like really tall and really
Yeah.
strong and really fit, really in great shape. Like he can do it, and I'm so scared. I'm sitting there
Now, did you do it any
like,
more on that trip, or did you? So this is
no,
the
no, no,
interesting
no, no,
thing.
no.
Or did you
One
actually?
time.
Okay. Now, did you ski and did you enjoy skiing on that trip? And
Yeah.
and was that like you're like, oh, that was cool, and man, now I get to ski and do something I love, and meanwhile you're kind of brewing up like I want to learn to fly this, and then you're like, I'm gonna learn to do it for other people.
So decision was made while I was still on the landing. He left. I don't know how much time I spent there until all that
Mm-hmm.
shaking stopped, but the decision was made on the spot. I skied. I really enjoyed it. I met the cool group of ski instructors, and I had a really awesome Christmas. It was really great time. There were guys from Ireland. There were people from
Yeah.
all over the place, and they're young kids. They love skiing, and they love teaching little kids to ski. So they go to Austria. They get their ski instructor licenses, and that's what I spend my time with them. When I got back to Ukraine, I just wrote to the lady who made an
Mhm.
appointment, because I had their phone number. Said, hey, I'd like to learn how to fly. Could you recommend the school? And he actually replied to me, and he said, look, we have several schools you can choose from. Take a look at this and this and this. And I basically, they had two schools in that valley, and picked the one that was oldest. And I my next birthday, I went to Austria, and I went to flying school, which for me was super scary. It was really scary for me for the first 3 years. Like my pulse was at the takeoff was boo, 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 boo. Like now I'm really confident, because I know I can stop at any time. Once
And
I got to
so,
the point where I had so much control that I can stop,
uh,
the fear went away. But it went on for like good 3 years or more.
how'd you raise the capital? Because it's interesting, like, you said you didn't really take a salary, and so it was people within your team that sent you to Austria. Did things
Mhm.
pick up and you eventually start taking a
No, not
salary?
really. No, not really. So if you think about this, um, I had the company paid for my housing.
Mm-hmm.
I had a car and a driver, and I could go to any of my gas stations and fill up, so I didn't have to pay for any fuel, so I could travel anywhere
And what about
as much
food?
as I
How
wanted
does
to.
food and electricity, all that kind of stuff?
I
Well,
didn't have to, that stuff. I didn't. I was CEO of the company. It was taken
that's
care
taken
of.
care of.
The
Okay.
only issue was that I had to give up my salary.
Okay.
But food, my home, my
Yeah.
driver,
Your
all the things that
necessities.
I needed, all the necessities, and if I needed to go somewhere within the country and I stayed in a
Yeah.
hotel, that was covered. So I had I didn't have any expenses, if you
Right.
say,
Right.
like
Got it.
I didn't have to pay for my living. All that was covered. It's just the salary part that there was an issue.
Yeah.
And of course, if my birthday is coming and I want to go for my birthday to Austria, I would say, look, this month I would need, and I didn't need much, because I think my licensing was like €1,000, and whatever I spent on lodging, that was the
Yeah.
expense. But it was not a major project where I needed to raise capital to learn how to fly. And once you pay the tuition for the flying school, they drive you up the hill, they give you the equipment. That stuff is all included. So
during this 6 years, you're working and become proficient at paragliding itself. And then 2022, you see.
So what I would do, I basically the difficult time was until 2019. And 2019 was the year when the company got rid of all the debt that it accumulated. It was a regional operator that went nationwide. And then, Crimea got annexed and they got stuck with all the debt that they acquired. But the volume went down by half and the currency, the dollar tripled. So when they came, it was 1 to 9. And then it was 1 to 30 almost. And then, so say 1 to 25 was the base, so almost 3 times. So because they borrowed money in US dollars, now they had to pay triple, or they had to, make 3 times more. But the volume got cut in half. So you're making half when you needed to make 3 times more. It was a big hole.
Man.
And you know what it made? It made me use all my skills in terms of how to get information and how to get really efficient. That stuff that I told you we were calculating gallon by gallon, it didn't exist before me. So I had 2 people that would call at some point to all the gas stations and get the numbers because we really needed to have them. And when we put it together, we had one girl who had to call all the wholesalers and beg that they would give us the product and promise that we would return the product. You want to hear something cool that you will never hear in the United States? I just started with 2015. The situation was that before I came, the company took a product from a wholesaler, they sold it, and the company used the money and they didn't pay them back. So the people who gave us the product, they call everybody to Kiev, all the owners, the finance, just basically all the traders, everybody's in that room. It was the packed room. And the wholesaler, there were just 2 guys came, the boss and whoever came with them, and us, it's the full room. And they're talking about how it happened and all the discussion. And I'm looking at the numbers. And it seems too small to me. So I get a calculator, I convert it into the US dollars, and it's like 40-something dollars. And I'm like, excuse me, am I correct? Are we talking about like 40-something $1,000? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, for this amount of money, we have everybody in the room, like, what's the big deal? And the wholesaler guy, he looks at me and says, Loo-beem, I understand you came from another world, but just as a friendly gesture. In Ukraine, people get killed for much less than $40,000. I go back that weekend. The girl who had to call around wholesalers and ask if they will give us the product, give us the product, we sell it, we pay you back. We have really bad credit reputation. The whole market knows that, before they didn't pay. And I remember that time it was in Ukrainian money. It's like, we figured out that we can sell it in 4 days. Like she said, I found the company. What happened was that they didn't have their own storage. And they had new product coming in and they had to get rid of the old product. And we were the only ones who could take it at that time because of the proximity of everything. It was just really, they needed to unload. And she says, they will give it to us. I said, great, so tell them we're taking it and we're going to pay in 4 days. She says, there's only one thing. I said, what? They want you to call personally and promise that you will pay for that product. I just came back from that meeting and I picked up the phone and I said, I will take that product and you'll get paid in 4 days. And I knew that if we didn't pay, we would not be having this conversation. They would not find me. That's what life in Ukraine was like. Okay, so that's the experience that I got from there.
Man, That is wild. So where where you mentioned you're in Turkey, where does Wings for Heroes and how when do you leave Ukraine? How do things
So 2019,
uh-huh.
it's a great question. 2019, the finances get restructured. We have product coming in. The company goes from minus to plus, and I said, oh, I need to. And they're like, dude, you got to make money now. I said, I can. It was so bad, Richard, that I remembered nights I was laying down, I was paralyzed. Half of my body couldn't move. It was so much stress and pressure that I couldn't move this arm. I was laying there. I found the cat. Actually, there was some little cat that followed me home. He followed me through the whole city. We came home. I was like, okay, if you followed me all the way, like I was laying there with this little orange thing, and I had nobody to talk to because I'm an American living in a foreign land. I am the CEO of the company, so I am, up the pole. I
Yeah.
cannot socialize. I don't have anybody to talk to.
Nobody can
And I am
relate.
like this. I am like this, man. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? So once we got through the point that company is, no, it's not only survived. Now it's like, it's after that long exhale, it's inhale. The money is flowing, the product is flowing, the stores are full. The teams that I build, they know how to work, they know what to do. And I'm saying, look, I am not renewing my contract. They offered me another contract. I said, I am not taking this contract. I am going to work on a consulting basis. And that was 2019 is actually when I took some time off and I went to Austria to fly. And I flew until I recharged my batteries because, man, I was empty. I was like, it's like empty refrigerator, you like keep taking food out. It's my dad's analogy. You keep taking food out and not putting anything in, and then one day you open, you say it's empty. That was Loo-beem. I was like, it's great, we accomplished it, but I couldn't care about anything. It was a huge deal that I accomplished. It was a humongous project, but I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was like,
I wonder if
walking
everybody
around
who reaches some sort of accomplishment like that gets that same sense of, then you need almost that break and
yeah,
you have
and I
to
was
go
flying.
recharge and kind of go, what's next? But also from that experience, I think it offers, and you're able to gather, and it offers some sort of perspective of shifting things back into focus of going, what's really important?
And you know what's really important is your health and your well-being, because even though I consider myself really strong psychologically and I can reframe things,
Right.
it came from a childhood. I think my resilience, learning the training resilience, like my mom was killed when I was 1. So when the rest of the world is going through that period of time when you're nurtured, I didn't have that. So, I think that even as much as I could handle, I couldn't take it in. I couldn't handle anymore. And I'm not a frugal guy, but I don't really I don't need anything in terms of like buying stuff. It's not my thing. I have a pair of skis, I have a paraglider, and how I would buy a paraglider in Ukraine because I live in Ukraine, and Ukraine is a poor country. You get big discounts.
Right.
I would fly for 1 year and I would sell it in the European Union for exactly the same price that I bought it a year ago in Ukraine. That's, that was the plus. That was the plus that I was able. So, I never did what other guys did. I never understood how people could go and spend thousands of dollars on, bottles of champagne and hang out with girls at the restaurants and that stuff. It's not my world. I skipped college experience to go to the Olympics, and I continued my whole entire life. I always lived below my means.
Yeah.
And I never got a taste for that crazy lifestyle. And if I did, either in New York, look, when I was trading in New York, I had guys in my office that were ordering Lamborghinis with their name printed. Like I don't know what, engrave or whatever
Yeah.
in the body of the car.
Mhm.
So if that car is ever gets stolen, you strip the paint and you find their name in there. That's how much money people were spending who I work with. I'm a CEO of a nationwide infrastructure company. You know, I am buying millions of gallons of diesel and gasoline, and I cannot understand spending a night with a bunch of girls and, you know, dropping 20, 30 or however many thousands they drop. That was like my budget for 2 years of flying. So, you know, I like doing stuff. I like mountains. I like outdoors. I like moving. I like learning.
Now, what also gave you, outside of what was the motivation? What kind of, to go back kind of to the Ukraine, like when you left Colorado, like,
I'm an American. I can do it.
yeah, so just wanting to improve. What were you wanting to see? What kind of change were you wanting to make?
I was, I saw myself as like the lost hope, you know, because
Mhm.
people weren't, it was so hard for them for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And then having this company, it had a really long history and it was doing really well until the war started. And it was an outside event that jeopardized 2,000 plus families. You know, it was their like livelihood.
Yeah. When did you leave Ukraine?
2000, well, 2019,
Mm-hmm.
I took some time off to fly, so we can say that year. But for good, I left December. I'm trying to think of a date, but I will not remember exact date. It was December of 2021.
Okay.
So just a month, 2 months before the full-scale invasion.
Now, you, like you had said, like it's been going on since 2014. A lot of people don't realize, and you just kind of, did you know what,
I
like
knew,
you just
I
knew,
knew.
and you knew, kind of
And
like
I
when
was
your
trying to
dad said,
find,
"Hey, it's time to go." Why did he
yeah,
choose
it
then?
was
You knew.
clear. It was clear. And it was, I knew that it would be forever because I was 100% certain. There was an article in The Guardian, it's the British newspaper, it basically said that Biden administration, there was 200, there was there was some loan that was approved for Ukraine, but Biden said that he did not release the money. Like it was approved, but he was not releasing it. And the paper said that if there is an escalation, there will be geometrically more money coming to you. But for now, nothing is coming. And I said, okay, this is the time to pack everything and go. Time to go. And that article, I looked at The Guardian, I looked for that article, and my friend who I sent, one of my friends, he's in the business. We worked together. 2004, first year when I started my business, we met, and he's actually visiting right here in Turkey. So we stayed really close, colleagues at first, and then now we are really good friends. And I said, I don't remember, I cannot find that article. And he says, you know what? I lost all my messages on my WhatsApp and I cannot find that article either. I went through, Richard, I went through every single article that Guardian has online. That article is gone. Now, either me and my friend, we're two crazies, conspiracy theorists, whatever,
Yeah.
making up stuff. I packed my stuff and I left forever. I said the war is coming. It's 100% certainty that if the money were approved and it didn't go out, but the promise is escalation means geometrically more.
Yeah.
That's when I knew, that's when I left for good.
Hmm. And where was your first stop?
During the pandemic, the only place we could go, like Ukrainians were allowed to go to warm place. My girlfriend's Ukrainian.
Mm-hmm.
The only place we could go was Turkey. Turkey was not even on the list to visit. And we came and we fell in love with the place. And, you know, it was the place to go. So we just went from Ukraine to Turkey.
Oh wow.
And we're
And
here ever since.
and so how's it been? What have you been doing and Wings for
First of
Heroes?
all,
Did you start
first of
Wings for
all,
Hero when we were back in Ukraine? And did you have any
no,
success
no,
with
no,
it then?
no.
Okay.
It's so we're talking about 2022 is when I got the
Mm-hmm.
idea, and I knew that I had no idea how to do it in the States because my idea it's really a risky idea to find backers for an idea that is so risky. Look, give me a hero amputee and I'm gonna go off the mountain. I don't think it would have been possible in the United States. It would have taken me hundreds of thousands of dollars and years to get it done. But here in Turkey, it took me a year and a half from the day I decided to fly our first guy. And there is a company here, and I've seen them flying limited mobility people without a chair. Like we have specially modified chairs, and I know we need to have one because you're taking risk when when you have full mobility, it's risk. But if you have somebody with a limited mobility and you need to move that person fast because you need to get some speed or you need to go to the sides, you may have major issues. But I saw them flying people who had prosthetics and they would remove the prosthetics. You have to have perfect conditions and you need to have two people helping you. So I went to one of the pilots who is also the owner of the company and I said, look, I have this idea,
Mm-hmm.
but we need a chair. And he said, no, actually we can fly without the chair. And he said, I have more than 50 flights. And he explained to me how it's going to work. So then I called a governor from our region, and his father used to work for me. He was one of my employees until he passed away. And when he passed away, you know, I lowered flags for him because he's been with the company like for almost 30 years. He's like one of the original dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of, you know, connection. And I called him and I explained what I'm trying to do. And he said, I think it's a great idea. Somebody will call you and we'll find you a guy. And I got a call. It's a service that takes care of, we have an assault brigade. They are one of the first ones and the oldest ones. They were fighting when it was a terrorist operation. And now they're, you know, one of the, I think they're a battalion or whatever. They're huge now.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a special service that takes care of their, you know, with the guys who come back. And there are a lot of women who are coming back, you know, with amputations. And so they have a special service that called me and they found me a guy who was a double amputee. And it was like 8 days before he had to come here. He got scheduled for another surgery and they sent me another guy. This guy in the middle is their first passenger. And he gets an invitation to all the opening and closings of our season. And that's the guy who we flew. And that's the guy who's on all our logos. And we call him number one.
Oh,
So number one, yes, number one it's bigger in the back.
I just noticed that I'd seen the logo a few times, but I just put
Yeah,
together because when I was
yeah,
looking through like you know on the photos you use like for the
there.
episode and whatnot, and I
That's
was
him
like, ah,
in the middle.
yes, that's
It's the real
cool.
guy. He's on all our logos. And
That is cool.
you know, since I have no idea how to raise money. This whole mission has been self-funded. I had to ask my dad for help, and I actually went this time. We had an emergency situation. We had to get him in for physical therapy for 1 month to save his only leg. And they said I will not take money from Ukraine, but this was more important than I will not. And I actually called the people that I work with, and we raised funds to bring him here for a month to rehab. Now he just left on the 25th, so now it's 4 days ago. But yeah, he's the real guy. He's on all our logos and on all our posters, and he's on our website. His first flight is on Instagram, pinned to the top on Wings for Heroes.
So you specifically, um, you're taking veterans that are coming from the fight in Ukraine, and
Right now,
mm-hmm,
right now, so the idea was that I have to get started because
right,
once it's starting and flying, it's easy to take it anywhere. And last October, for training, I was in San Diego, and they have Torrey Pines Glider Port, which is at the beginning of the Torrey Pines golf course. That spot is the oldest spot in the United States and maybe in the world. And they have perfect wind coming from the sea. It's just an ideal spot. And when I was visiting, I saw that they had a flying chair. It was in the corner at that time. Nobody was using it. They have a chair. They have pilots. They're already insured. The naval base is here. The Naval Memorial Hospital is at the top of the hill. So, you know, in November, I am crossing the ocean back home, and I am planning on an event to fly US veterans, or, you know, if we find amputees, there will be so my biggest challenge in America now will be finding a veteran, not creating the whole thing, but just finding guys and girls to fly.
Wow. So yeah, so you get the opportunity.
So I'm already there, you know, it's done. It's just a matter of time. If it's not, for some reason, it doesn't happen in November, but I am 90% confident that I will make it happen in November. And then I want American veterans to travel here to Turkey, especially if they need to do some physical therapy and recovery, because it will be cheaper to bring them here for a month and do a full month of rehab. I have a physical therapist, I have a psychologist, I have a swimming coach, I have a cycling coach, acupuncture, massage, everything. We can do 3 sessions a day of each, and it will be cheaper, including the flight, than just doing 2 weeks of only physical therapy in the United States.
So
this
is actually much more than just the flight on a paraglide.
Yeah, it started with the flight.
Okay, so it started with a flight, but you have the opportunity and the ability to offer physical therapy and some of these other services. So
this guy in the middle, I took him to my physical therapist. We had the session April 9 to April 19. We go to my physical therapist. She says, he has a huge problem. His muscles are he's standing on one leg, so his muscles are shrinking.
Yeah.
And they shrunk to the point that it's pressing on his sciatic nerve. So he can do a wrong move and he's paralyzed. So she says, you got to bring him here for 1 month. It's done. You know, this was the next level for our, you know, for Wings for Heroes. And he rehabbed, and he qualified for a new prosthetic leg that cost $75,000. They refused him one time. He was here rehabbing. He said they were going to refuse him a second time. He says, excuse me, I was 20 years old when the war started. For just 13 days, I volunteered. And he said, I may have 15 years left in this good leg, and I would like to get this one, so this prosthetic leg, so I can have some quality of life. And they approved him. Now, the second guy, he spent almost 3 years at the front lines. He had a hand grenade dropped next to him from the drone, and it took off his right side of his head. You know, they stitched up his ear. He's deaf on one side. He just had plastic surgery, and when he's wearing glasses, you cannot tell that he is. But when you see a guy without the leg, you want to help them. When you see a normal guy, you're saying, what's your problem? He has big problems. He has not had one psychological treatment until he came here. And all he wanted to do is stay inside and drink. Nothing else. We had a breakfast where I had I told them about my childhood, and they got the soul of the mission. We were in this beautiful place overlooking Mediterranean Sea. The clouds rolled in, and the rain started hitting it's a metal roof, like relaxing for most people, but he was like this. He's going under the table, and I'm like, dude, you can go. Just go outside, do whatever you need to do. And after that day, I told him, 2 weeks since he came from the front line. So they stitched him up and they sent him back out. He was not finished. I said, look, you earned to do whatever I am not I have no right to tell you what you can and cannot do after what you went through. I just don't even know how you're functioning. So if you want to drink, here are the volunteers. You just tell them, they'll bring you whatever you need.
Right.
And I have WhatsApp message groups, and I message like, this time we're meeting here, we're going there, meeting here, going there. So the whole group sees when we're going. And I said, you'll see all the messages. If you don't come, I know what you're doing. If you come, it would be nice to see you, but there is no pressure. And he said, okay, cool. And the next day, it was the only time when I hired the photographer, because all our photos are done, you know, with the bestseller ones from the iPhones.
Yeah.
And that's the next night where we were doing the photo shoot. And he actually came, he showed up. And after that, he tried to show up for a lot of events. Then he goes home, he calls me, says, Loo-beem, I have not been drinking for 1 week. He was so traumatized, Richard, you know, he just came from combat, and he's messed up. He has permanent imbalance in his head because one of his middle ears is gone, and it's like his ear is stitched. It doesn't have an opening. And I said, you cannot fly, man. I'm sorry, you're drinking and there's so much trauma that if we go in the air and something happens, like I cannot put any pilot or you at that risk. So I'm sorry, this time you cannot fly. So he says, I haven't been drinking for a week. Then he writes me and he says, I'm checking into the VA hospital for 10 days. And after 10 days, he says, I need more time. I'm going for a month. So just because he wants to come back and fly, and he wants to stop drinking and he wants to get better, he's doing something. So this mission with the idea, let's just take them flying, it just, you know, physical therapy is added, psychological support is added. All the volunteers, they're missing number one. They're like, number one is gone for 4 days. They're like, the beach is empty. Where is number one? Like, everyone is like, when is he coming back? Because he's such a cool example. He's been here for 1 month. He did not drink 1 beer. It was so important to him that he did not drink 1 beer. And when tomorrow we had an early morning session for physical therapy later, but swimming and cycling could be early, I'm going to sleep. I need to rest. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm hanging out at home. You know, I get them he had an apartment. He said, I'm just recovering, getting ready for tomorrow. So it became a lot more than I could have imagined. And it's just by me observing it. And oh, by the way, I schedule all the appointments. I take them to the appointments. I'm in all physical therapies, all swimming. I missed 1 cycling because I had a call. I couldn't go. And Turkey has 2 big holidays a year. And it was the second one that just ended. So we had a break in physical therapy. So she gave us homework. And to exercise the amputated leg, we use rubbers. And I was, you know, for 2 weeks after the holidays ended. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the physical therapy. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, we're doing homework. And I actually, you know, I'm the guy who's holding the rubber and exercising the amputated leg. Man, it got so strong in 1 month. It was amazing. Like at the end, I couldn't hold it with my hands. I had to, like, I was holding it like this, the rubber, and he was lifting his amputated leg. I had to step on it on the end because he was like, I would go like this and he had so much strength that he would pull my thumb from my. So that's what I do, man. I just do everything, you know. Everybody thinks I live a life. Yeah.
What is it that drives you, and what are you getting from it? That, you know, how does somebody who's this kind of finance person, money person, get into this wanting to care for others to where you're doing anything that needs to be done, nuts to bolts? What are you getting from it as a sense of fulfillment?
So first part of the question, I tell everybody, look, when you wake up in the morning, look to where the sun is rising. That's the east. And that's where the war is. The wars are always in the east. And they always want to go west, and that's west, that's where we live. So between the place where there is war and peace, there is a space. And that space is occupied by these guys. You know, it occupied by you when you were serving. It is occupied by men and women who said, we are not going to let the barbarians who want to come in and show their force and kill our families. And that's what they're doing. They just kill and they plant flags and they take what you have and what I have. They don't want to work. They don't want to learn. They just want to come and take by force. So these men and women, they volunteer, a lot of them. In their case, Balik, number one, volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
You volunteered. So you volunteer and you serve the country. And you are enabling me and everybody else who's living in the free society to pursue their dreams, whether that's making more money, starting businesses, raising families, buying a home, whatever. Whatever we're doing is only possible because there are brave men and women who place themselves in the space between war and peace that we have. I think and I know from the childhood that we have a contract with them. And saying, look, you go protect me. If anything happens to you, you come back and I will take care of you. And I, meaning the whole society. And as you mentioned before, the whole society is like this, let's just look away, like it never happened. And it's okay. It's been like this for generations and years. But I could not look away. I saw it in my childhood and I see it repeating, 40 years later. It goes on in perpetuity. I am just the guy who could not look away. And I think I'll go back to the Red Cross. Remember we talked about the Red Cross helped me?
Mm-hmm.
In 1859, there was a Swiss banker named Henry Dunant. He was on a business trip to Italy. June 20-something, 25th, I think, he arrives to a place called Solferino. And he witnesses the Battle of Solferino, where 170 Austro-Hungarian soldiers fight the Imperial Army, which is France and Italy, about 140,000. So there were more than 300,000. He said that he was watching that battle. They went on so hard that at the end of the day, there were more than 40,000 dead and wounded in that field. And he said there was not one person helping them. So Henry Dunant goes out and he gathers all the villagers. At that time, mostly they were women. And they pull out the injured soldiers from that field. And they said some churches, they put them in churches. Some churches had more than 1,000 wounded soldiers. After he's finished in Solferino, Henry Dunant goes back to Geneva and he writes a book called A Memory of Solferino. That book becomes so popular that later he was able to start the Red Cross. Now I am thinking, what would happen to humanity if Henry Dunant, just one guy, looked away? He looked at that battle and he said, okay, he moved on and he went on with his life. We would not have the Red Cross. We would not have 11 million volunteers. And we would not have tens of millions of families that get that letter that says, like, we were in the field, here's your loved one died, you can heal, you can closure. If people don't get the closure, the worst thing that can happen to a human being, prisoners of war are missing in action, is the most psychologically difficult. It's torture for a family member. They cannot have a closure. They will always wonder. I went to the Red Cross Museum. I saw more than 6 million cards, Richard. 6 million cards that went to families that received the letter saying it's over. He's dead. You can grieve. I'm just the guy who could not look away. That's all. I could not look away at that guy who rolled out from my gas station. I could not look away from a teenage girl who said, you know what? They're not going to break me. They can take my leg, but they're not going to break me. And I just think I'm fulfilling the contract for everybody. I am balancing the scale. That's all I'm doing. It's my, I was placed on this earth to take a shot at it, and I'm doing my best.
I love that. That is, man, it's powerful. I know because I've come to figure out through my own story of some way of I'm kind of like you say, I remember distinctly seeing somebody in a wheelchair going to a clinic one day going, no matter how bad life is, they're so afraid of the unknown on the other side that they will claw tooth and nail to stay in this life and hold on to everything because it means something. Now, I don't know if that's a story about faith or life, but what I do know is that, um, like you said, I mean, I want to make a difference. I've always come from a place of service. We have gifts. Your gift is numbers and assessing, I think, risk and situation and knowing that. And, you know, it's definitely a monumental effort to make the world make the world a better place. And like you said, taking a stab at it, you feel obligated. I mean, I do too. I don't. What else is there? I mean, if you're not making the world a better place, it's like, I don't know. But
I always wanted to leave this place better than I found it, and I see that it's becoming more and more difficult. I don't
it
know. I know
is.
I'm not normal. I'm not normal like that, you know.
But we
I
have
don't
to
know,
give
maybe
each other
because
hope because, you know, that's the thing is so many people are quick to shut it down and so many people don't want to do it. It's easier to look away. Actually, you know what's fucked up is that not only are people looking away, they're fucking looking directly at it with their phone recording it, but looking away literally, spiritually, emotionally, and in the way that it matters. You know what I'm saying? Now they got the phone and now they're putting it on blast, but they're looking away in all sense of purposes because nobody's doing a fucking thing about it, which makes it even worse and more atrocious and more gross.
by bringing these people out, by bringing these guys out, I light up the whole place. It makes the war real for everybody who is peaceful. We are on the other side of the Black Sea. It's right there.
Yeah,
All the European Union, you know, I am sorry to say that, but I think it's in the best interest of the European Union to kill all the Ukrainians because you know what? They are the ones who are in between. Because the next step west is them. And they're the best friends. And keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. It's a sick business. If people knew how much money is being made on our number one's leg, his two prosthetic legs are total going to be $100,000. Last year, there were 50,000 amputees, more than 50,000 amputees in Ukraine.
wow.
Get a calculator out. They're generating billions
You know what?
everywhere. Everywhere.
Everybody talks about the business of war in terms of like, you know, the fucking war machine and all that, like in the US. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Don't pretend that you don't. But this is the first time I ever really, because I come from a medical background, that I ever put that figure and number and calculated that into it as a profiteering part of it. That, yeah, okay, minus all the machines and bombs and bullshit. Now, guess what? Guess who else gets to fucking profit? And
Look, why
yeah,
do they want to spend more money? Why do they want to spend more percentage of GDP
yeah,
on war? Because it's expenditure, and when you have expenditure, you show growth. Everybody's sick about this growth.
growth. Yeah, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah,
Bullshit.
you're not growing. You're making more bombs and blowing, you're killing people to show percentage growth in GDP.
But
What
are
the
we meant?
fuck is that,
But look,
man?
look, look, look. Age. Like think of it this way. Think of it like in a spiritual sense. You're gonna age and grow naturally all the way to your fucking death. None of us get a different ending. So instead of focusing on growth, why aren't we focusing on enjoying the present and cultivating like the community and friendships and skills and love and that kind of stuff.
You know why? Because that's not profitable. Listen, you ask me, man, everything I had, I spent on this mission. Then when I ran out of money, I went to my dad. I said, Dad, help me. That's how the missions are run. I live in Turkey because it's so much cheaper than living in the United States. I'd love to move back to Colorado and ski 100 days a year and have a clean water and have clean air and have regulations and all that stuff. I'd love to do that. It would be awesome, but I can't. There are two reasons. Reason number one is because I have a mission, and reason number two is everything that I've accumulated in my life, I spend it on them. And I'm not saying I don't need that. I'm just saying that is the reality of running a mission. And let's go back to Henry Dunant. The guy starts the Red Cross. 11 months later, they signed the first Geneva Convention. For listeners, the Geneva Convention is the rules that stipulate, number one, how we treat soldiers that are injured, prisoners of war, and now we're covering innocent bystanders, because when the war comes into peaceful territory, there are always innocent people who are not part of the conflict that they become part of the conflict. So those are the rules. The enforcement, there is no enforcement of these rules, but those rules were written 11 months after Henry Dunant witnesses Battle of Solferino, 1859. Then he writes the book. Then he starts the Red Cross. 11 months later, they find the first Geneva Convention. Red Cross becomes popular. Guess what happens? Henry Dunant gets pushed out of the Red Cross. He disappears for more than 20 years. Nobody knows where he is. Then, one day, somebody finds him in Zurich, working in a hospice, taking care of dying people. He is destitute, he is broke. If the hospice didn't give him a little house, little room to live in, he would be homeless. After 22 years, they bring him back to Geneva, and he gets the first Nobel Peace Prize for the work that he's done in starting the Red Cross and spending his life taking care of people. Do you know his last words?
What?
On his deathbed? He said, "Where has humanity gone?" One man, that is my role model. I haven't had role models in my whole life because I had issues with all the people. My role models, Henry Dunant, Mother Cabrini, and Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of Turkish Republic. 3 people in history that I look up to.
My best friend, when his apartment caught on fire and he managed to get out, basically in a set of scrub bottoms that he was wearing, and he had nothing. And when he moved, it was the Red Cross who set him up with everything. And that was my first kind of experience in terms of what they did. Other than my job in the military, I was an admin, and my job was, if there was an emergency, I would be the one to receive the Red Cross message and cut the orders and whatnot to get you back to where you needed to go. But why is give us an example. I don't know much about Turkey, but you were talking about the Turkish guy who's another role model. Well,
yes.
What's his name, and give me a why. What did he do? Or what's his
Mustafa?
quality?
Excuse me. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going back to after First World War. Mm-hmm. Turkey lost. And basically, prior to that, it was Ottoman Empire. That's for 600 years. They went to Vienna 3 times. It takes, I think, 3 hours by plane to fly in there. So Ottoman Empire conquered a huge part of the world. But after the war was lost, the Sultan agreed. We give this part to Italy, we give this part to France, we give this part to Germany, don't kill me. But Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, he was an officer in Turkish army, and he said, you cannot give away our land. And he organized the uprising against huge, powerful countries that just won the war. And he fought and he won. He led his people. And he basically dedicated his entire life to Turkish people. He said, we're going west. He outlawed all the, all the dresses that Muslim countries that there were. And he was a visionary. He was dealing with biodiesel in early 1900s, and he created aviation. Turkey has airports all over the place, has wonderful highways. Women got to vote. He was all about the equality for women. He never got married because, he was dedicated to his people. And he had an adopted child. She became the first, not only fighter pilot, she became an instructor to the pilots.
Oh, wow.
And he basically created everything for his people. And anywhere you go in Turkey, his portraits are on flags. It's in their blood. It's in their DNA. He is the founder of this republic. And I think Turkish Republic will be forever because they're all united on one thing, and that thing that keeps them together, it's Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. It's the man who dedicated his life to his people, and he is one of the few leaders in history. I cannot think of another one who was really selfless with whole entire life. And because he was so brave and he organized the uprising. Imagine, man, they lost the war. There are stories. There was a battle of Çanakkale. They were fighting so much that their two bullets met each other. They have it.
Mm-hmm.
Çanakkale is the only channel where, like when the ships go through a channel, they say, I am passing blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You're not passing Çanakkale. It's the only place that you cannot pass because so many people died there. They all go silent and they just sail through that part. There are stories that people carried ammunition 600 miles. It's 600 kilometers. We're getting close to midnight here. My calculator is slowing down. They carried ammunition more than 300 miles just to fend off the offenders who wanted to take their country over. There is a statue of an old grandma. She was carrying big, I don't know what you call those. Yeah, it's for the cannons.
Oh yeah. Like would it be like well, they're probably like a cannon. It's either going to be like a musket ball or you're going to be packing it.
It's not a ball, it's just a long thing. And basically the weather was bad. It was cold and she thought that something would happen to it. So she took off a blanket from her grandchild and she covered that thing. Anyways, that man, he single-handedly organized the uprising and he fended off Germany, France, Italy that already won the war. He established the Turkish Republic, and Turkish people love him and respect him. And because of him, I think this republic is forever, because till this day, he's really celebrated, regarded. His signatures are on cars everywhere. It's just,
oh wow,
he really lived his life for his people. And
that's
the man that I...
That's interesting. Like, I don't know much about Turkey, but like the fact that you live there, you understand that and whatnot. But it's even at 49 years old, I don't know if it's the older I get, but you can look back and you realize like some of these things aren't that far back in reality. And that kind of some of these things that are great ideas or things that we've kind of forgotten about or we just take for granted, even like the Red Cross or somebody standing up for a selfless idea, the betterment of people. It's the idea that they're willing to fight for. And, what I feel a lot of myself and what I heard you talk about of, especially in the world we live in today, um, standing up for what's right and the peace, and it's a tough stance. It's an idea, and it's not a popular position because it doesn't support
Majority.
monetary growth for anyone, which is really what seems to be that all anybody else is interested in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I applaud you for that. And I think the only thing that kind of continues to give me hope is when I can hear other stories like that and see someone like yourself. And when you look at it, be it from your lens, which is completely different from mine, um, historically from how we grew up and whatnot, but there is hope. And these ideas can prevail if we can get enough people behind the ideas, if we can get these conversations started and decide that, um, hey, that it's just not good enough. This is not enough. Like, you know what? You can't have the West, you know, and leave all the people in the in between out of it. Just stay to your side. And, if the people in the middle and the West can withstand that, hopefully at some point, like any chart, graph, or anything, or like a business, eventually you get to take a salary. Eventually it becomes profitable. And maybe
Hmm.
these good ideas and the good message and goodness will win over evil, you know? Because there's people just like you and I that's what the stakes are. They're not these far ideas. I mean, sometimes just because you were born in the US and you live here, you're shielded from that mandatory having to serve or your home being invaded. It's just crazy. Like, I live in Texas, it'd be like the equivalent of going, imagine if everybody in Louisiana was trying to come to Texas and take it over. If you live in Ukraine and that's what
Hmm.
Russia's doing, like, nobody can seem to think about it, but that's really how it would be. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
neighbors. When I was growing up, we were, they were older brother. But that
yeah,
is saying I am quoting my history, but it's no more and never again. With this war, it's destroyed forever. That relationship, there was like so close forever. Putin ended it. He made the worst enemies out of, like, we're like, imagine you two brothers and then something happens and then one kills another one and
yeah, especially too, because like probably familiar. It's no different if like you grow up in Texas and part of your family moves to New York. It's like, well, if you were in Ukraine and some of your family lived in Russia or vice versa, and now one half of the family stuck in here and one half of the family stuck in there, and who
it's a
are you?
true stories,
Are you with your family? Or are you with the political system? Who are you against? Who are you for? And
It's
um,
really, and you know what? People are living like this, and Turkey is the only country where they can meet now because
oh, okay.
Russians cannot go anywhere. So we have generations. I met 4 generations on the beach last year. They said this is the only place we can come because they moved, long time ago, and their
Hmm.
life is there. And this part of the family moved to the United States. And this is they can meet here. And I'm like thinking like how can you live there?
What are
Like
you
you're
getting? What are you
Ukrainian?
getting from them? Like, what's the sentiment? What's the spirit? Do they wish it would end? Do they agree? Not agree? Do they? Is it kind of like
Look,
being a kid between mom and dad, going, "I just wish everybody would get along and stop fighting"?
oh no, 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 no.
What's it like?
It's it's look, they're killing our people. Look, more than 10 million people are displaced. We're talking more than 5 million children lost their home. Hundreds of thousands of children have been kidnapped from Ukraine and moved to concentration ideological camps in Russia. They're brainwashing the Ukrainian kids. They're hitting children's hospital. My dad lives next to Children's Hospital in Kiev, and last year I was like, "What are you doing there?" It's like, we have the, air missiles, defense, everything is cool. And then in a few days, the Children's Hospital next to his home, the biggest one in the country, gets hit. They are doing stuff, man, that is insane. It's just, and nobody's. To all your listeners, I'd like to point one thing, that the reason the Ukrainian or the Russian, the Ukrainian war is a big deal is because this is the first time in modern history when the country that has nuclear weapons is using that leverage to rewrite the map of the world. This has never happened before. This is the first time. And if we try to make friends with a country that using blackmail we have a nuclear weapon, we just opened up a Pandora box that cannot be closed. United States of America is the only country that has nuclear weapons, and it was the only country after the World War II that had nuclear weapons that didn't go and colonize and expand. We didn't.
Yeah.
Okay? That says a lot. Right now, we have the first time in history when a nuclear power nation is wiping out a nation of 40 million people that are killing them for 4 years, and nobody's doing anything. And we have a president in the White House who wants to make friends with President Putin. I voted Republican. My voting record is Republican 100%. I'm an immigrant who did not vote Democrat because, I want to make my own life. I don't need anybody. Yeah, I need help right now, okay? Hey, if anybody wants to help Wings for Heroes, I need a lot of help because I cannot fund this thing by myself. But I'm saying the fact that nobody's talking about it to the American people, I think it's an atrocity. Russia has nuclear weapon and it's taking over 40 million people nation, and nobody's doing anything. Nobody's talking about it. It's nuclear blackmail.
I never thought of it that way in terms of trying to gain using that, because what's so funny is it's going to sound so stupid and simple, but as a hiring manager, when you use behavioral based interviewing questions, you go what is it? Future behavior is going to be like past behavior. So it's the same, like you fucking negotiate with terrorists. Then if you let them go through with the blackmail, then guess what? It's going to continue to happen if you just don't stop it and say no. What you permit, you promote. That's an old corporate jargon stuff. It applies all the way up to the world, I mean, if you permit that kind of stuff to happen, and
we are.
It's like
we are. It has never happened before.
The world is there is so much. It is a hot
This is a big deal, man. This is a really, really big deal. This is next level like never before. And you know what? They're scaring us with nuclear war. You know what's going to happen? The world is not going to fall apart. If they drop a nuke, it's going to be in one place. It's going to be a really bad situation. It's going to be, I don't know, but they're not going to split the world in part. And we're told we are so scared that we will do anything, like take a vaccine, because we can die of a flu. But this is worse than the vaccine.
Oh yeah. People, yeah. The more, I just turned 49 a couple weeks ago or last week, and
happy birthday, brother.
Thank you.
Mine is next week.
And you're going to be 49 or 50?
50.
Oh, yeah. It's I don't know if it's our understanding of it, because I guess if we both grew up in this Cold World time and understanding what that was like and the threat and the fear, And it's funny because we grew up on opposite sides of it, and we can both agree. We're sitting here having a conversation, smiling, going, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. As children of the Cold War, was we're supposed to be having conversations with each other and smiling and laughing about it, not worried
Because it's
about
over.
not worried about that we're actually probably, I mean, with everything you talk about, China, Russia, and Iran, I mean, that's more than just what I can remember of the Cold War and worrying about Cuba off the coast of Florida.
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
that's and you know, I don't think of it necessarily like, oh, I'm worried about it from the US standpoint. Um, I look at it more from a global standpoint of, I mean, that's three. Um,
Major.
yes, but it's people don't understand. It's about their intentions. It's not because they want to they want to make their country bigger so they can spread positivity and joy and make the world a better place. You know, if you look at these places, not like necessarily the people who live in these places, what their quality of life is like, you know, that's not why they're doing it. It's not like, it's not like when an In and Out comes to your town or a Costco comes to your town, that means your town is getting better. You know, this is not that situation. Um, People don't seem to get that. Um, yeah, I don't know, and that's kind of one of my biggest things.
Nobody's gonna go on the major television and tell people the truth. And the truth is that we have a nuclear blackmail.
Yeah. How do
And
and
the
the
way to
question is how do we
you know,
change it? How do
you know
we
how we change it? We will complete embargo on energy resources, and then he would be done in 6 months. He would be out of money. Finito. But we're still trading, we're still buying. He's still shadow tankers, just like Iranian tankers. You think the United States could not stop shadow tankers for Iran? They could have done it a long time and they wouldn't have the money to enrich uranium of any sponsoring terrorism. Iran is a big issue because it's the biggest sponsor of terrorism along with Russia. There are two countries that are sponsoring terrorism, Russia and Iran. Everybody else doesn't have the resources. These two, they have the resources. And if the United States was Syria and they said full embargo, they wouldn't have the money. It's easy to check all the tankers. It's easy to stop them. It takes one decision. One phone call from the White House. Okay, stop. Stop. Like that. That's how much power we have. Or not we, whoever's in charge.
and what about China? Where do they have the money, influence, or are they just kind of more, well, they're kind of
Look, China, look at China. They've never done anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're a threat that's never done anything. Has they started any wars? Have they participated
No,
anywhere? Have they
other than
killed
what
anybody except their own
Russia's
people?
using. Yeah.
Okay, they use them. We're talking about using. So India. So is India. Nobody's talking about the fact that India is like suddenly they're a huge exporter of oil. Where did they get that oil? They got it from Russia. Now they're biggest traders. They're selling Indian oil all over the world. There is no Indian oil. It came from Russia. They're mixing oil in the sea. There's the Russian tanker, then another tank. I was in that industry. I know it. You take oil from country A, then you get something from country B, you mix it up in the sea, and then you get C. SEA, you mix it in the SEA, and you get a product that comes from a country C that doesn't even exist.
It's almost like, you know what? It's just like directly related to finance, like in your accounting.
It's all about money. You just follow the money. It's all about money. It's really easy to start wars, but it's really difficult to finish them. Then the way to finish the war is not by fighting, but just turning off the financing. Once you stop the money, they're done.
So so let's say there's no war, because everybody always talks about war is profitable. Let's say there's no war. um, how do people make profit to fill in for the war, or is the key?
We're gonna go through a period of recession,
Yeah.
and it's normal. You know, some people are gonna lose jobs, especially in defense industry and related. It's like when the big fish dies, a lot of little fishes die around it. So it would be a huge. We're not gonna have any GDP growth, but it's all fake growth, or it's financed by body parts and by lives of the future of other countries.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a, you know, I don't have a, I am a solution. I am just taking care of the mess that people created by taking care of amputee and now deaf veterans. So, you know, I'm doing my part.
Yeah. And what do you
If
want?
they put me in charge, I would figure out how to end wars. I would. And it would be difficult. It would be difficult, but a lot of things, all great things require difficult choices. And right now we have a big, beautiful bill that is going to be passed, and I took it apart. I took it apart, and the math is that we're going to have greater national debt, and the bet is that the tax savings that will be provided, and you know, the cuts that are going to go to certain people, they're going to fuel the economy, and the future revenue will outweigh the lost revenue today. And in history, it never happened. It didn't happen during Ronald Reagan. It didn't happen during George Bush. It didn't happen first presidency, first term of President Trump. The numbers show that, you know, they quadrupled national debt, each one of them. And now we're looking at 36 trillion. It doesn't, it's basically, I don't know, you know, we need, fixing it will require a lot of math crunching, and we will have to go through pain. You know, Richard, we will have to go through pain. And this nice living, look, one thing that I am really, in the financial industry, they tell you this 10-year average, right? If you stay in the market for a long time, you will average 10%. Okay, Loo-beem graduated in 99 from NYU. In 2015, when I left for Ukraine, the market was about the same place. And in those 16 years, it went down 75% one time, and the second time it went down 50%. 15 years of my working career and of all the accomplishments that everything that I've accomplished in the United States, the market was exactly where it was 15 years earlier when I graduated. So where's the 10% average? And it's all these things that are told to us that we just accept from the childhood. And one of the things is that you create vacuum of information, you filter what people get.
Yeah.
Say, why are we so nice to Russia? Well, why not? Because they have a lot of resources. It would be great to do business with them. We can make a lot of money. A lot of money.
Yeah,
but
it's like
we're looking at nuclear blackmail. First time ever.
Man, that is like,
What else is there to say?
it's so interesting. Like when I look at you and I talk to you as this person, and all these parallels with finance and everything, and how somebody who can know so much about finance to know that it's the horrid of all of existence, and that you're so well versed in it, and you're doing this humanitarian type thing to do your piece of this big problem that damn near seems impossible to fix. I mean, minus conversations, because I think conversations and perspective offer reasoning. And if people could be reasonable and reason, then they would realize all this stuff. But, you know, it's power. Why does anybody want to, you know, because that's my thing, is like in resources. in settling land, it's like, well, you have your piece of property and it's enough to sustain your family. That should be enough. But it's like a country. Why does a country want to grow? Why do they want to be more?
It's
Why do they want
sickness.
to be
It's
more
called, you know,
powerful?
what are the cells called that keep, that multiply, 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 and they multiply
Cancer.
without stop? Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. That's exactly what's going on. And
They're just not
it's
happy
like
with enough.
yeah, it's sickness.
Man.
I mean, I understand, you know, I was there. I was there. I was the guy chasing the money, but it just got to the point where I got it, and the most meaningful relationship in my life was gone. And then I realized that I always thought that money would solve all my problems. That even if I worked so hard and I would make this perfect life and I get a lot of money, then I would have no issues. It's ridiculous, you know. And once you go through that, then it's just like, you know, why do it again? Like I'm just getting closer to the, you know, that
Hmm.
birth dash.
Yeah.
Like we are in a dash and I'm getting closer to the other side of the dash. Like I already
Yeah.
accumulated the money and I had it and I lost it and I had it and I lost it and I had it and I spend it on something that is meaningful and that is I gave back. You have to be crazy to start a mission.
Yeah.
I know I'm not normal psychologically because you cannot do that, you know? Like Bill Gates can do it, Warren Buffett can do it, but Loo-beem and Richard cannot do it because we're just average people. We're trying to, you know, we are trying to do our best and provide for families. And if we stop, you know, like we cannot stop. Those guys can, we can. And yet, like who else would do this? Who else would see a guy without two legs rolling out of the gas station and say, man, where is he going? And then find him and think like, wow, there's like 1,000 trucks that roll by.
Yeah.
We're on the border. We're 30 miles from Hungary, 30 miles from Slovakia, 50 miles from Romania. We have trucks nonstop. It's a wall of trucks for 100 miles. They're just one after another. They just go in one line and not one stop and help this guy in a wheelchair on the side of the road.
You know what? I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up because you know what I always say when you said that is that one person, you're the one person out of all the people who decided to stop and go and find them. I always say you have to go out and be the person that you would want to meet, you know, because one day that might be you in the wheelchair on the side of the road with hundreds of trucks passing by. And you're going to be asking, why didn't one of them stop? Well, remember when you were in that truck and you passed by and you're like, I could have stopped. You can sit there and ask yourself, well, why didn't I stop? So I always say, you got to go out and be the person that you would want to meet. You know? That's how I try to act. Not always successful. It's a work in progress. You know? But man, wow. You have had quite the journey. I feel like you've lived a lot of life, and I'm excited to see what you're gonna do with this, how much more you're gonna grow it, or not. You know, actually not. I'm gonna take that back. It's not about growth. I want to see how much you enjoy it, how long you continue to do it, how it takes shape and form or differs. Um, because, you know, it's not all about the growth, it's about being in it and the value of being in it and the person that you're giving it to. About number one, and whoever else can be in there and what they get from it, not the monetary value. And that's why, I was like, I'm careful to see how it could grow. But if I mean grow, I mean not in a scalability sense, but in a value sense.
Value and quality of life to those
how
guys.
many
Yeah.
people are going to get something from it?
Yeah.
Be it a peace of mind, and even if it's a couple of hours away of forgetting about everything that's going on. I had a night like that the other night. The world is a nasty place, and as an empath, I can absorb negative energy, and sometimes you need to go out and absorb some positive energy to get you through the rest. And sometimes it's draining, but my ability to do that is what allows me to connect with others and understand them and hopefully better serve them. So, well, let the audience know everywhere they can find you. Where are you most active?
We are most active in Turkey on the beach when we have our sessions, when we have our veterans here. But on the internet, it's wingsforheroes.org. WNGS number 4 HEROES.
And everything will be in the
wingsforheroes.org.
show notes. I know
Thank you.
I've seen quite a few interviews on YouTube. I know you have a good presence there. Are you on Instagram, X, any of those platforms?
Wings for Heroes is on Wings for Heroes Instagram and Wings for Heroes on Facebook. Since I am, I went to college before the internet. I find that Instagram is the easier platform for me, but all the videos that I put together, everything is on our website. So if you go to wingsforheroes.org and you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see the videos that are on Instagram. So the website is the best place. First I told the story about what I'm going to do. And in April, I rewrote it and I told what I've done so far and what's next. So wingsforheroes.org is the best place to get the information. There is a contact button. It goes directly to me. I'm the only guy who is running this mission full time. I'm the one who is, working with these guys and scheduling and driving them. And I'm the one who's going to answer all the contact requests. And obviously, my goal is, so the program is running now 12 months out of the year. There shouldn't be any breaks because there are tens of thousands of veterans who if we just take amputee veterans, we're talking about tens of thousands of them. And I think that for them to have a place where they're welcome and where they're loved is the important thing. And that's what they find at Wings for Heroes. My hat goes off to our volunteers who will not go home until our guests or our heroes are gone home. So, if you ever anybody wants to come out and see how we work, just contact button. I'll give you the next dates and all the information is there.
Man. Yeah, I'm definitely going to keep in touch with you.
Okay.
I've kind of been absorbing your content, and it's varied because there's so many things on a podcast topic that one could talk about with you. I feel like there's multiple conversations to be had, and I tried to touch a little bit on all of it because I would watch like one video and get some pieces, and one video and get some other pieces, something different. And I was like, because I was like, well, I kind of want to know, about the stuff I asked about, like what is it like and the influence and the fact that you've experienced so many different things and your viewpoint, but somebody with so much experience, you know, I'm always impressed of somebody who leaves with love and service and still believes that peace is the answer. You know, I mean, I don't like the other stuff. I mean, I'm thankful that we have people that protect us from that and go and do those kinds of things. But yeah, it's a hard world, and it's going to take us all coming together to figure out some solutions.
Solution, yeah. I want to, say this thing that with all the problems that we have in the world, there are three things we can do. We can make those problems bigger. We can sit around and talk about it. We can bitch about it. We can complain about it, or we can try and become part of the solution. So one last thing that I would like to say, what I learned from the Red Cross, that if anybody wants to help, a lot of times people just don't know how to help. And it doesn't matter where you are or what you do, there are only 3 ways that you can help. Number 1, you can donate blood, because shortage is huge. In every state in the United States, if you donate blood today, you will probably save somebody else's life today or tomorrow. So 1, you have to donate blood. Number 2, you can volunteer, because providing service is the biggest thing that you can do. Take the time that you will never get back and give it to somebody who is less fortunate. And number 3, you can write a check. Donate blood, provide service, write a check. Doesn't matter what it's for. Those are the only 3 things that you can do to help.
I love it. All right. Until next time, go out and be the person that you would want to meet.
Asteroid of fear.